Greece finishing season 9, 8 episodes by mid-2013, while America didn't see some of these episodes until months or even over a year later, created one of the most bizarre international broadcasting mysteries in cartoon history. Japan banning Reef Blower for having too many silent scenes left fans scratching their heads about censorship logic. Canada outlawing the Great Snail Race for animal abuse, while completely ignoring way worse episodes sparked heated debates across international SpongeBob communities. And those are just 3 of the mind-blowing international SpongeBob lore entries in this video. Can you imagine all the wild stuff there is to uncover when we dive deep into 3 hours of international SpongeBob lore to fall asleep to over the next 3 hours? I was certainly shocked by some of the stuff I found when I made this video, so if you're ready to be blown away by what's about to come, sit back, relax, maybe grab some international Krabby Patty variants, hopefully they weren't banned in your country, and let's begin. Starting it off with the global translation empire. SpongeBob's global translation empire, over 70 languages worldwide. When you think about the most successful animated characters in television history, SpongeBob SquarePants stands in a league of his own. But here's something that might blow your mind. This cheerful yellow sponge living in a pineapple under the sea has conquered not just American television, but the entire planet. We're talking about a translation empire that spans over 70 different languages across 170 countries, making SpongeBob one of the most globally recognized characters in entertainment history. The numbers alone are staggering. According to official Nickelodeon data, SpongeBob SquarePants is viewed in 170 countries and is available in 24 major languages for broadcast. But when you dig deeper into the full scope of international versions, the show has been translated and dubbed into over 70 different languages. From major world languages like Mandarin, Chinese, and Spanish to smaller regional dialects like Kurdish and Welsh, SpongeBob has managed to find his way into living rooms across every continent. But this global domination wasn't an accident. It represents one of the most ambitious and successful international animation distribution efforts ever undertaken. The show has become what Paramount Media Networks calls the most distributed property in their entire catalog, generating over $13 billion in merchandising revenue by 2019, with a significant portion of that coming from international markets. The big players, major language adaptations. Let's start with the heavy hitters. In China, SpongeBob becomes Haimin Bobble, Huimian Bei Habio, which literally translates to Sponge Baby. This adorable name change reflects how different cultures adapt the character to fit local sensibilities. The Chinese version airs on major networks like CCTV 14 and has found particular success as a language learning tool, with the repetitive nature of the show making it perfect for Mandarin learners. In Germany, SpongeBob transforms into SpongeBob Schwammkopf, keeping the original first name but changing SquarePants to Schwammkopf, meaning sponge head. The German dub has been particularly successful, airing across multiple channels, including Nickelodeon, Germany, Super RTL, and MTV Germany. German children actually voted SpongeBob as someone who could save the nation, with the character receiving 88% of votes among kids aged 3-13 inches, a Nick TV Germany poll. The Japanese version, SpongeBob, Soponji Bobu, presents an interesting case study in cultural adaptation. Initially, skeptics doubted SpongeBob could succeed in Japan because his design was so different from popular Japanese characters like Hello Kitty and Pikachu. However, Viacom specifically targeted Japanese women in their marketing campaign, and the strategy paid off spectacularly. SpongeBob became hugely popular, particularly among young Japanese women, proving that good storytelling transcends cultural boundaries. In France, SpongeBob becomes Bob l'Éponge, a more direct translation meaning Bob the Sponge. The French adaptation has been broadcast on numerous channels, including Nickelodeon, France, Canal J, and even mainstream networks like France 3 and TF1. The French version has been particularly successful in maintaining the show's humor while adapting cultural references that French audiences would understand. Regional variations and creative adaptations. What's fascinating about SpongeBob's global reach is how different regions have created unique adaptations that reflect local culture. In Spanish-speaking countries, SpongeBob becomes Bob Esponja, and the show has been broadcast across Latin America on dozens of different networks, from major broadcasters like Telefe in Argentina to smaller regional channels throughout Central and South America. The Arabic version, Sebong Boob Square Bantis, represents one of the more complex adaptations due to cultural and religious considerations in different Middle Eastern countries. The show airs across various Arabic-speaking nations through networks like NBC3, Nickelodeon Middle East, and numerous local broadcasters, with each country sometimes making minor content adjustments to fit local broadcasting standards. In Nordic countries, SpongeBob takes on completely different names that reflect local languages. In Swedish, he becomes SvampBob Furkant, in Norwegian, SvampBob Furkant, in Danish, SvampBob Furkant, and in Finnish, Paavo Pessusieni. These variations show how translators work to maintain the character's essence while making the name sound natural in each language. Lesser-known language versions. Here's where things get really interesting. SpongeBob has been translated into languages and dialects that most people have never even heard of. In Wales, the character becomes SpongeBob Pantsgwar and was broadcast on S4C through their children's programming blocks. This Welsh version represents Nickelodeon's commitment to preserving and promoting minority languages. The Kurdish version, Sepaning Beabe Pontetel Chawargashia, aired on Zerok TV and other Kurdish language networks, providing entertainment for Kurdish-speaking children who often have limited access to content in their native language. Similarly, the Maori version from New Zealand, SpongeBob Tarau Poroha, was broadcast on Wakaata Maori, supporting indigenous language preservation. Even more surprising is the existence of versions in languages like Georgian, Latvian, Suklis, Bob's Kvadrat Biksis. These adaptations required not just translation, but complete cultural localization to work in their respective markets. The economics of global translation. Creating over 70 language versions of SpongeBob represents a massive financial investment that few entertainment companies would dare attempt. Each version requires hiring local voice actors, translators, cultural consultants, and distribution partnerships with local networks. The fact that Nickelodeon and Paramount have maintained this many versions speaks to the incredible profitability of the SpongeBob franchise. The economic impact extends far beyond just broadcasting rights. In each country, localized SpongeBob versions drive merchandise sales, theme park attractions, and licensing deals. The character's global recognition has made him what industry insiders call a killer merchandising app, with the franchise generating billions in revenue across international markets. In Japan alone, SpongeBob merchandise became so popular that high-fashion designer Jeremy Scott used the character as inspiration for a Moschino runway show, creating luxury items including a mink coat worth $45,000 featuring SpongeBob imagery. This kind of crossover success demonstrates how the global translation strategy has elevated SpongeBob from a simple cartoon character to a genuine cultural phenomenon. Technical challenges of global adaptation. Translating SpongeBob into 70-plus languages presents unique technical and creative challenges that most shows never face. The show's humor often relies on wordplay, cultural references, and visual gags that don't translate directly across languages. Each version requires creative adaptation rather than literal translation to maintain the show's comedic timing and appeal. For instance, character names often need complete reimagining. Patrick Star becomes different variations across languages. sometimes keeping the Patrick name, sometimes being completely renamed to fit local naming conventions. Mr. Krabs presents particular challenges in languages where crab doesn't create the same phonetic appeal as the English version. The show's underwater setting actually helps with global adaptation since ocean life is universal, but cultural references within episodes often require significant changes. American pop culture references need to be replaced with locally relevant ones, and sometimes entire storylines are modified to fit different cultural contexts. Educational impact and language learning. An unexpected benefit of SpongeBob's global translation empire has been its effectiveness as a language learning tool. The show's simple vocabulary, clear pronunciation, and repetitive themes make it ideal for language learners of all ages. Educational institutions worldwide have embraced SpongeBob episodes as teaching aids. In China, language learning centers specifically recommend SpongeBob for English learners studying the original version, while Chinese SpongeBob episodes help foreign students learn Mandarin. The character's name appears 8 times in the Chinese theme song alone, providing excellent pronunciation practice. Similar patterns emerge in other countries where SpongeBob versions serve dual purposes, entertaining local audiences while helping foreign language learners. The show's 22-minute format provides perfect bite-sized language learning sessions that hold viewers' attention while delivering educational value. Broadcasting infrastructure and distribution. The logistics of distributing SpongeBob in over 70 languages requires an incredibly complex global broadcasting infrastructure. In some countries, the show appears on major national networks. In others, it's distributed through cable channels, streaming services, or even direct-to-video releases. Major international broadcasters like Nickelodeon operate localized versions in different regions, each carrying appropriate language versions. But the distribution also extends to hundreds of smaller regional broadcasters that serve specific linguistic communities. This creates a distribution network that reaches virtually every corner of the inhabited world. Streaming services have expanded this reach even further. Netflix carries SpongeBob versions in multiple languages, allowing viewers to switch between different dubs or subtitles. This has created new opportunities for cross-cultural appreciation of the show and has helped smaller language versions find wider audiences. Cultural impact and global recognition. The true measure of SpongeBob's global translation success lies in how deeply the character has penetrated different cultures worldwide. In each region where SpongeBob has been successfully localized, the character has become part of local popular culture, generating memes, references, and cultural touchstones that extend far beyond the original show. SpongeBob memes have achieved such widespread international popularity that Vox declared, "SpongeBob memes came to rule internet culture in 2019. These memes transcend language barriers, with visual gags from the show being recognizable and shareable across all cultures where the show has aired. The character has become a truly global icon, recognized by children and adults across multiple generations in dozens of countries. This level of international cultural penetration is achieved by very few entertainment properties and speaks to both the universal appeal of SpongeBob's character and the effectiveness of Nickelodeon's global localization. Strategy: the future of global SpongeBob. With over 70 language versions already in existence and the show continuing to produce new content, SpongeBob's global translation empire shows no signs of slowing down. New streaming platforms and digital distribution methods are creating opportunities to reach even more linguistic communities worldwide. The success of SpongeBob's global translation project has established a template for international animation distribution that other studios now attempt to replicate. However, few have matched the scale, scope, and cultural impact of SpongeBob's worldwide presence. As the show approaches its 25th anniversary, SpongeBob SquarePants stands as perhaps the most successful example of global entertainment localization in television history. From major world languages to the smallest regional dialects, This optimistic yellow sponge has proven that great storytelling truly has no borders, and that with proper localization and cultural sensitivity, American animation can find homes and hearts around the entire world. The global translation empire of SpongeBob SquarePants represents more than just business success. It's a testament to the power of universal themes like friendship, optimism, and humor to connect people across all linguistic and cultural boundaries. Summary: SpongeBob SquarePants has achieved unprecedented global reach by being translated into over 70 different languages and broadcast in 170 countries worldwide, making it one of the most internationally distributed animated shows in television history. The show adapts to local cultures with unique names like Bobble, Sponge Baby in Chinese, SpongeBob Schwammkopf in German, and versions in dozens of regional languages, including Welsh, Kurdish, and Maori. This massive translation empire has generated over $13 billion in merchandising revenue by 2019, with SpongeBob becoming Paramount's most distributed property and a genuine global cultural icon that transcends linguistic and cultural boundaries. The character's universal themes of friendship and optimism have proven so effective that SpongeBob has inspired everything from internationally recognized internet memes to high-fashion collaborations, representing perhaps the most successful example of global entertainment localization in television history. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the time when foreign countries got episodes before America. When foreign countries got episodes before America. Picture this. You're an American SpongeBob fan sitting at your computer, desperately searching for information about the latest episodes. But instead of finding news about upcoming American premieres, you discover that kids in Greece have already watched an entire season that won't reach your television for another 2 years. Welcome to one of the most bizarre phenomena in television history: foreign countries consistently getting SpongeBob episodes before the show's home country of America. This upside-down release schedule has created a strange world where American fans have to look overseas to see what happens next in their own show. From Greece finishing entire seasons years ahead of schedule to Germany getting crucial pre-movie episodes months early, SpongeBob's international distribution has turned normal broadcasting logic completely on its head. The most mind-blowing example happened in 2013 when Greece had completely finished airing Season 9A before any other country in the world. While American viewers were still waiting for new episodes, Greek kids were already discussing storylines that wouldn't reach American screens until 2015. Germany shocked everyone by getting the final pre-movie episodes in September 2003, months before they aired in the USA in 2004, and Australia managed to see the major backstory episode Friend or Foe in November 2006, 5 months before American audiences got to learn about Mr. Krabs and Plankton's friendship origins. Greece takes the crown. The Greek SpongeBob story reads like something out of a fantasy novel. By mid-2013, Greek viewers had completely finished watching Season 9, a B3, that's episodes 179 through 189, of us, before viewers in any other country had even started the season. This wasn't just a small head start. This was a massive 2-year advantage that left the rest of the world scrambling to catch up. Season 9A officially began on the 21st of July 2012 with Extreme Spots and Squirrel Record, but the Greek broadcast schedule moved at lightning speed compared to everywhere else. While American fans had to wait until the 29th of March 2015 to see the season finale, Yeti Krabs, Greek audiences had already binged the entire first half of Season 9 by the middle of 2013. The Greek version, called M Pi Omicron Mu Pi S Pi Omicron Upsilon Gamma Gamma Alpha Rho Kappa Itas Bob's Foungarakis, became the unofficial world headquarters for SpongeBob spoilers. Episodes like Don't Look Now, Seance Schmeance, and the controversial SpongeBob You're Fired all premiered in Greece during 2013, making Greek SpongeBob fans the most informed viewers on the planet. This created some truly surreal situations. Greek children were discussing plot points and character developments that American adults wouldn't see for years. Online forums became divided between people who had access to Greek broadcasts and those who were desperately trying to avoid spoilers. Some dedicated fans even started learning Greek just to follow the discussions on Greek SpongeBob websites. The Greek television landscape helped make this possible. SpongeBob aired on multiple channels throughout its run, including Alpha TV, Star Channel, and eventually Nickelodeon Greece when it launched in September 2010. These networks had different programming needs and scheduling pressures than American television, allowing them to burn through episodes much faster than Nickelodeon USA was comfortable doing. Greek SpongeBob became so culturally significant that it spawned its own merchandise lines, DVD collections, and even political controversies. In 2007, the National Council for Radio and Television actually started investigating the show after complaints about violent content, though the exact reasons for later broadcasting changes remain unclear to this day. Germany's pre-movie triumph. Germany holds a special place in SpongeBob history as the first country to complete what fans now call the Golden Era, the original 3 seasons that aired before the first SpongeBob movie. In September 2003, German viewers watched the final episodes of Season 3, effectively closing the book on Steven Hillenburg's original vision months before American audiences got the same closure. This timing was incredibly significant because Season 3 represented the end of an era. Episodes like SpongeBob Meets the Strangler and Pranks a Lot were originally intended to serve as a series finale, with Pranks a Lot specifically written as a potential ending to the entire show. German fans got to experience this conclusion in September 2003, while American viewers had to wait until October 2004. The German dub, SpongeBob Schwammkopf, had become massively popular throughout Germany, Austria, and German-speaking Switzerland. The show's success was so enormous that German networks felt comfortable airing episodes as quickly as they received them, rather than spacing them out over longer periods like American television typically does. Many Season 4 episodes also aired in Germany during late 2006, well before their American premieres. This established Germany as one of the most reliable countries for early SpongeBob content, creating a situation where German SpongeBob communities became international sources for episode information and spoilers. The German success created its own cultural phenomenon. SpongeBob music albums were produced exclusively for the German market, featuring original songs performed by the German voice actors. Popular German musicians like Marcus Becker, MC Fitty, and Roland Kaiser actually recorded songs with SpongeBob characters, creating a multimedia empire that existed nowhere else in the world. German children voted SpongeBob as someone who could save the nation in a Nick TV Germany poll, with the character receiving 88% of votes among kids aged 3 to 13. This level of popularity helped justify the aggressive scheduling that put Germany months ahead of other countries. Australia's special episode, Surprise. Australia created one of the most specific and dramatic examples of international episode precedence with Friend or Foe, the special episode that revealed the backstory behind Mr. Krabs and Plankton's legendary rivalry. Australian viewers saw this crucial piece of SpongeBob mythology in November 2006, a full 5 months before its American premiere on the 13th of April, 2007. Friend or Foe wasn't just any regular episode, it was one of the most important special episodes in SpongeBob history. The episode revealed how Mr. Krabs and Plankton went from being best childhood friends to bitter business enemies, and it showed the accidental creation of the Krabby Patty secret formula. This was information that SpongeBob fans had been speculating about for years. Having this crucial backstory premiere in Australia first created an unprecedented situation. Australian SpongeBob fans suddenly possessed insider knowledge about the show's core mythology months before the creator's home country got to see it. Online discussions became divided between people who had seen the Australian broadcast and those desperately trying to avoid spoilers. The episode was even more significant because it marked the beginning of Season 5 and represented SpongeBob's official return after the first movie. Australian audiences were essentially getting the first taste of post-movie SpongeBob content before anyone else in the world, including Americans. This timing created some fascinating internet dynamics. Australian SpongeBob fan sites became international destinations for spoiler-hungry fans. People started learning about Australian broadcast schedules and time zones just to figure out when they might be able to find information about new episodes online. The Australian release also coincided with a DVD strategy that further complicated the timeline. The Friend or Foe DVD was released on the 17th of April, 2007, just 4 days after the American television premiere. But it included several other Season 5 episodes that wouldn't air on television until months later. This created multiple layers of early access depending on whether fans had access to Australian broadcasts, DVD purchases, or just patience for American television. The broadcast business behind the chaos. The reasons behind these seemingly random international premieres lie in the complex world of television distribution deals and corporate strategy. When Nickelodeon sells SpongeBob to international broadcasters, each country negotiates separate contracts with different terms about scheduling, episode delivery, and broadcast windows. International broadcasters often receive completed episodes months before their scheduled American air dates. While Nickelodeon USA might hold episodes for strategic scheduling reasons, creating special events, avoiding competition with other shows, or maintaining consistent season pacing, foreign networks often have completely different priorities and needs. A Greek network might have open time slots that need immediate filling, or they might want to capitalize on SpongeBob's popularity by airing new content as quickly as possible. German broadcasters might be competing with other children's programming and need fresh episodes to maintain audience share. Australian networks might have different seasonal programming cycles that make early SpongeBob premieres strategically valuable. The dubbing process adds another layer of complexity. Some countries have incredibly efficient dubbing pipelines, while others take much longer to complete the translation and voice recording process. If German dubbing studios finish their work quickly and efficiently, those episodes become available for broadcast immediately, regardless of what's happening with the American broadcast schedule. Different countries also have varying standards for children's television content, broadcast regulations, and advertising requirements. These factors can speed up or slow down the approval and scheduling process, creating seemingly random variations in when episodes actually reach audiences. Canada, the neighboring anomaly. Canada has frequently received SpongeBob episodes before the United States, despite sharing similar English-language television markets and geographic proximity. Episodes like Yours, Mine, and Mine, divided by cranked crabs, aired in Canada before reaching American screens, creating the amusing situation where American fans could theoretically drive across the border to see new episodes earlier. The Canadian situation is particularly interesting because it eliminates language barriers and dubbing delays as explanatory factors. Canadian episodes premiere in English, often on the same networks that eventually air them in the United States. The early premieres appear to be purely strategic decisions based on different programming needs and competitive pressures between American and Canadian television markets. Canadian broadcasters often face different seasonal programming cycles, advertising demands, and audience measurement systems than their American counterparts. What makes sense for scheduling in Detroit might not work in Toronto, even though the cities are separated by only a river and share the same language and culture. This geographic proximity makes Canadian precedents especially noticeable and sometimes frustrating for American fans. Unlike episodes premiering in Greece or Germany, Canadian broadcasts are immediately accessible to English-speaking American audiences through cable systems, internet streams, or simple geography. The internet changes everything. The rise of the internet has transformed these international scheduling differences from minor curiosities into major events that shape global SpongeBob fandom. When episodes premiere in foreign countries first, clips, discussions, and detailed summaries immediately appear online, effectively creating worldwide spoilers for audiences in countries where episodes haven't aired yet. Fan communities have developed sophisticated tracking systems for international premieres. Websites like Encyclopedia SpongeBobia maintain detailed databases of international air dates, while forums like SpongeBuddy have dedicated threads where fans share information about upcoming episodes in different countries. Some fans have become international broadcast experts, learning about foreign television schedules, time zones, and programming patterns just to stay ahead of the official American release schedule. Others have developed networks of international contacts who can provide real-time information about new episodes as they air around the world. The internet has also made it easier for dedicated fans to access episodes from foreign broadcasts through various official and unofficial means. This has somewhat reduced the frustration of staggered release schedules, as committed viewers can often find ways to watch episodes regardless of their local broadcast timeline. Recent examples keep the tradition alive. The pattern of international episodes premiering first hasn't diminished with newer seasons of SpongeBob. Recent examples include Unreal Estate Divided by Code Yellow airing in Israel on Pi Day, March 1, 42017, about 3 months before the US premiere. Sanitation, Insanity, and Bunny Hunt aired in Spain ahead of their American broadcast dates, continuing the long-standing tradition. Even episodes from the most recent seasons have appeared internationally first, proving that this isn't just a historical quirk from SpongeBob's earlier years. The pattern has become so established that dedicated fans now expect international premieres and actively monitor foreign broadcast schedules as part of their regular SpongeBob viewing experience. Modern streaming services have added new complications to this pattern. Some episodes appear on international versions of streaming platforms before they're available in the United States, creating yet another avenue for early access that doesn't depend on traditional television broadcasts. The global fan community response. The SpongeBob fan community has evolved unique traditions and cultures around these international premieres. Online forums have developed their own vocabulary for discussing region-locked episodes, international spoilers, and broadcast precedents, terms that wouldn't exist without SpongeBob's unusual global distribution pattern. Some fans have learned foreign languages specifically to follow international SpongeBob news and discussions. Others have developed elaborate strategies for avoiding spoilers while still staying connected to the broader fan community. Still others have embraced the chaos, becoming international SpongeBob broadcasters who track and share information about episodes regardless of where they premiere. The phenomenon has created a truly global community of SpongeBob enthusiasts who are more internationally minded than fans of most other television shows. These fans often know more about foreign television markets, international broadcasting schedules, and global media distribution than many industry professionals. Corporate logic in the madness. From Nickelodeon's corporate perspective, these seemingly chaotic international release patterns actually represent sound business strategy, even when they frustrate fans. Different countries have different peak viewing seasons, advertising cycles, school schedules, and competitive entertainment landscapes. International broadcasters pay substantial licensing fees for SpongeBob content, and part of what they're purchasing is flexibility to schedule episodes in ways that maximize their local audience engagement and advertising revenue. Requiring all episodes to premiere in America first might reduce the value of international broadcast rights and ultimately hurt the show's global profitability. The practice also helps maintain SpongeBob's cultural relevance in international markets by ensuring that foreign audiences don't always feel like they're receiving outdated content. When Greece or Germany gets episodes first, it creates local excitement and media attention that might not exist if those countries were always months behind the American broadcast schedule. The strategy has clearly worked from a financial perspective. SpongeBob has generated over $13 billion in merchandising revenue by 2019, with a significant portion coming from international markets where early episode access helps maintain audience engagement and cultural relevance. Summary: the phenomenon of foreign countries getting SpongeBob episodes before America has created one of the most unusual distribution patterns in television history. Greece finished airing Season 9A by mid-2013 before any other country. Germany got the final pre-movie episodes in September 2000, 3 months before the USA saw them in 2004. And Australia received the crucial backstory episode Friend or Foe in November 2006, 5 months ahead of its American premiere in April 2007. This pattern continues today, with countries like Israel, Spain, and Canada regularly receiving episodes before American audiences, reflecting complex international broadcasting deals, dubbing schedules, and strategic decisions that prioritize global market needs over chronological release patterns. The result is a worldwide SpongeBob fan community that has adapted to expect the unexpected, turning episode hunting into an international adventure that spans continents, languages, and time zones. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to The Quarantined Crab. The Quarantined Crab: COVID's Impact on International Broadcasting. Sometimes television episodes become famous not for what they show, but for when they can't be shown. In the history of SpongeBob SquarePants, no episode demonstrates this phenomenon better than Quarantined Crab, a Season 12 episode that accidentally predicted a global pandemic and became the center of one of the most unusual broadcasting situations in television history. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this episode was banned from American television but was released in other countries, starting with France on the 6th of May, 2020. Creating a reverse situation where international audiences could watch an American-made episode that Americans themselves were forbidden to see. The story of Quarantined Crab represents a perfect storm of unfortunate timing, corporate caution, and international broadcasting differences. What started as a simple SpongeBob episode about a fictional disease called clam flu became an unwitting commentary on real-world events, leading to one of the most extensive episode bans in Nickelodeon history. The episode wouldn't air in the United States until the 29th of April, 2022, nearly 2 years after its original scheduled premiere and long after international audiences had already seen it. This situation created a fascinating case study in how global events can reshape television distribution, turning a children's cartoon into an example of cultural sensitivity, corporate responsibility, and the complex world of international media rights. For nearly 2 years, Quarantined Crab existed in a strange limbo where it was simultaneously banned and available, censored and celebrated, depending entirely on which country you lived in. The episode that predicted the future. Quarantined Crab was produced in 2019, well over a year before anyone had heard of COVID-19. The episode was written, animated, and completed as part of SpongeBob's regular Season 12 production schedule, originally intended to air on the 4th of April 2020, alongside its partner episode, My Two Crabses. The episode follows a familiar SpongeBob formula. A health inspector arrives at the Krusty Krab and declares that someone inside has contracted clam flu, forcing everyone to be quarantined inside the restaurant. The plot centers around paranoia and fear as the characters turn on each other, with Mr. Krabs systematically throwing everyone into the restaurant's freezer as he suspects them of being infected. SpongeBob sneezes due to Pepper accidentally getting in his nose. Patrick pretends to be sick so he can join SpongeBob in the freezer. And Pearl, Mrs., Puff, and Squidward all get locked away for increasingly ridiculous reasons. The episode climaxes with the characters working together to capture Mr. Krabs, only to discover at the end that no one was actually sick until their fighting and exposure to the dirty restaurant makes them all genuinely ill. When the episode was created, it seemed like harmless cartoon chaos. The clam flu was just another silly SpongeBob disease, similar to previous episodes featuring fictional ailments. The quarantine setup was meant to be a bottle episode that would generate comedy through character interactions in a confined space. Nobody involved in the production could have imagined that within months, the entire world would be experiencing eerily similar situations in real life. The episode's accidental prediction of global events was so accurate that it became genuinely uncomfortable to watch. Characters wearing masks, paranoid behavior about contagion, quarantine measures, and social isolation all appeared in the episode before they became part of daily reality for billions of people. Even specific details like the health inspector's protective equipment and the character's anxiety about who might be infected seem to mirror real-world pandemic experiences. The American ban begins. As COVID-19 began spreading globally in early 2020, Nickelodeon executives realized they had a serious problem. Quarantined Crab was scheduled to premiere on the 4th of April 2020, right in the middle of widespread lockdowns, rising death tolls, and global panic about the virus. The episode's plot, which might have been funny 6 months earlier, now felt insensitive and potentially traumatic for children who were already dealing with real quarantines and pandemic fears. Nickelodeon made the decision to pull the episode from American television entirely. A network spokesperson explained, "The Quarantined Crab centers on a virus storyline, so we have decided to not air it due to sensitivities surrounding the global, real-world pandemic." The episode was removed not just from the broadcast schedule, but also from streaming services like Paramount Plus and digital stores, including Amazon Prime and iTunes. The ban was comprehensive and immediate. Quarantined Crab was even removed from the Season 12 DVD release, making it impossible for American fans to purchase or view the episode through any official channels. This represented one of the most complete episode bans in SpongeBob history, more extensive even than previous controversial episodes that had been pulled from regular rotation. Vincent Waller, a supervising producer on SpongeBob, addressed fan concerns on social media, stating that the episode was not permanently shelved, but would likely not air until the pandemic was over and no longer a major concern. This created uncertainty about whether American audiences would ever be able to see the episode, especially as the pandemic stretched on longer than anyone initially expected. The American ban created a unique situation where the episode existed but was inaccessible to the audience it was originally created for. Unlike previous SpongeBob controversies that involved content being edited or moved to late-night time slots, Quarantined Crab was completely removed from American media distribution. International release. France leads the way. While American audiences were completely shut out from seeing Quarantined Crab, international broadcasters took a different approach. The first country to air the episode was France, where it premiered on the 6th of May 2020 through the VOD service MyCanal. This created the unprecedented situation where a major American animated series had an episode that Americans couldn't watch, but French viewers could stream at their convenience. The French release opened the floodgates for international broadcasting. Throughout 2020 and 2021, the episode aired in dozens of countries while remaining banned in the United States. The international release pattern showed how different countries and broadcasters approached pandemic-related content with varying levels of sensitivity and caution. By the 1st of July 2020, the episode had leaked on Hebrew VOD services in Israel. Spain aired it on Paramount Network on the 23rd of September 2020. Greece, Belgium, Norway, Finland, and numerous other European countries followed throughout 2020 and 2021. Each country seemed to make its own decision about whether the episode was appropriate for their audiences, with most concluding that the fictional virus plot was sufficiently removed from reality to be acceptable. The international releases weren't limited to Europe. Latin American countries began airing the episode, with clips appearing on Nickelodeon, Latin America's website, as early as April 2020. Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and other South American countries all aired the episode before it was available in the United States. Even countries with their own significant COVID-19 outbreaks decided that Quarantined Crab was appropriate for broadcast. This created a fascinating global map of availability where the episode could be seen almost anywhere except in America. Dedicated SpongeBob fans in the United States had to rely on international clips, summaries from foreign fans, or unofficial uploads to get any sense of what the banned episode contained. The underground episode phenomenon. The international availability of Quarantined Crab, while it remained banned in America, created an unusual underground phenomenon within SpongeBob fan communities. International fans became sources of information and bootleg content for American viewers who were desperate to see what they were missing. Online SpongeBob communities developed elaborate systems for sharing information about the banned episode. Fans in countries where the episode had aired would post detailed summaries, screenshots, and sometimes even full uploads for American fans. This created an international network of SpongeBob smugglers who were helping American fans access their own country's television content through foreign channels. The episode's banned status actually made it more famous than it probably would have been otherwise. SpongeBob fans, who might never have paid much attention to a regular Season 12 episode, became obsessed with seeing the forbidden content. The mystery and controversy surrounding Quarantined Crab turned it into one of the most discussed SpongeBob episodes in years. Fan forums dedicated entire threads to tracking which countries had aired the episode and when it might become available elsewhere. Some fans learned about VPN services specifically to access international streaming platforms that had Quarantined Crab available. Others followed international SpongeBob social media accounts to get clips and updates about the banned episode. The situation highlighted how internet communities can circumvent traditional media distribution. Despite Nickelodeon's comprehensive ban on American access to the episode, dedicated fans found ways to see it anyway through international sources. This created a gray market for SpongeBob content that operated entirely outside official distribution channels. Corporate sensitivity versus international broadcasting. The different approaches taken by American and international broadcasters toward Quarantined Crab revealed interesting cultural differences in how pandemic-related content was handled. American networks appeared to be extremely cautious about anything that might seem insensitive or traumatic to audiences dealing with real quarantines and virus fears. International broadcasters, however, seemed more willing to trust their audiences to distinguish between cartoon comedy and real-world tragedy. Many countries that had experienced severe COVID-19 outbreaks still chose to air the episode, suggesting that they viewed the SpongeBob content as sufficiently removed from reality to be harmless entertainment. This difference in approach may have reflected varying cultural attitudes toward censorship, different regulatory environments, or simply different risk tolerances among broadcasting executives. While American networks were extremely risk-averse about pandemic content, international broadcasters seemed more willing to let audiences make their own decisions about what they found appropriate. The international releases also highlighted how global media distribution works in practice. Each country's broadcaster made independent decisions about Quarantined Crab based on their own standards and audience considerations. There was no coordinated global response, instead, dozens of individual decisions created a patchwork of availability that happened to exclude the episode's country of origin. Some international broadcasters made minor edits to the episode for their local audiences. In the UK and Ireland, scenes of Squidward frantically spraying sanitizer in his mouth were cut, suggesting that even broadcasters who aired the episode recognized that some content might be too close to real pandemic experiences. The episode's content and controversy. The actual content of Quarantined Crab helps explain why it became so controversial and why different countries reached different conclusions about its appropriateness. The episode begins innocuously enough, with familiar SpongeBob characters gathering at the Krusty Krab for a normal day. The introduction of the health inspector and the clam flu diagnosis immediately creates a pandemic scenario that would have seemed purely fictional in 2019, but felt uncomfortably realistic by 2020. The episode's portrayal of quarantine behavior proved to be accidentally prophetic. Characters wearing protective gear, paranoid accusations about who might be infected, social distancing measures, and the psychological stress of confinement all appeared in the episode before they became common real-world experiences. Mr. Krabs' increasingly authoritarian behavior as he locks people in the freezer based on minor symptoms reflected real concerns about government overreach during pandemic responses. The episode's ending, where the characters discover that no one was actually sick, but their fighting and poor sanitation during quarantine makes them all genuinely ill, seemed to comment on real pandemic debates about whether lockdown measures were helping or hurting public health. The final scene, where the Krusty Krab gets placed in ultra-mega quarantine and dropped on top of the chum bucket, felt like a darkly comic take on the endless extensions of real quarantine measures. Even the episode's title, with its deliberate misspelling of quarantined as quarantined, seemed to mock the constant media coverage of quarantine policies that dominated news cycles in 2020. The playful approach to what had become a serious and frightening topic for many people made the episode feel inappropriate to American broadcasters, but apparently acceptable to international audiences. The episode included several specific pandemic-related elements that felt too close to reality for comfort. Characters discussing who might be infected, fear of transmission through normal social contact, the isolation of suspected cases, and the general atmosphere of paranoia and mistrust all mirrored real pandemic experiences. The health inspector's protective equipment and scientific instruments resembled real COVID-19 testing and contact tracing procedures. The long road back to American television. As the COVID-19 pandemic stretched through 2020 and into 2021, Quarantined Crab remained banned from American television while continuing to air internationally. The episode's availability became a strange barometer of how different countries were processing pandemic-related content and moving toward a post-COVID mindset. By 2021, some American fans began questioning why the episode remained banned while life was slowly returning to normal and pandemic restrictions were being lifted. The continued international availability of the episode made the American ban seem increasingly arbitrary, especially as other pandemic-themed content began appearing on American television. Vincent Waller's earlier statement that the episode would likely not air until the pandemic is largely over and not a concern created a vague timeline that left fans uncertain about when they might finally be able to see the episode. As vaccines became available and restrictions were lifted, fans began speculating about when Nickelodeon might consider the pandemic sufficiently over to allow the episode to air. The episode's absence became increasingly noticeable as season 12 reruns aired without it, leaving a gap in the sequence of episodes. Fans who were watching the season in order would suddenly jump from Who Are Zoo to other episodes without any explanation of what had happened to the missing second half of the episode pair. International fans who had been sharing information about Quarantined Crab with American audiences began questioning why the episode remained banned in the United States when it had been airing without controversy in dozens of other countries for over a year. This international pressure, combined with changing pandemic attitudes, may have contributed to Nickelodeon's eventual decision to allow the episode to air. The American premiere and reception. On the 29th of April 2022, nearly 2 full years after its original scheduled air date, Quarantined Crab finally premiered on American television. The episode aired as the final episode of Season 12, making it the last episode of the season to reach American audiences despite being produced as part of the regular season order. The long-awaited American premiere generated significant attention from SpongeBob fans who had been waiting years to finally see the banned episode legally. Social media exploded with reactions from viewers who were experiencing the episode for the first time, often comparing it to their real pandemic experiences and marveling at how prophetic the 2019 produced content seemed. Many American viewers noted that the episode felt less shocking or controversial than they had expected based on the extensive ban. By April 2022, most Americans had lived through nearly 2 years of pandemic experiences, making the fictional clam flu scenario feel more like historical commentary than disturbing content. The passage of time had transformed what seemed inappropriate in April 2020 into what felt like harmless cartoon entertainment by 2022. The episode's reception highlighted how context and timing can completely change how content is perceived. The same episode that seemed too sensitive to air in 2020 felt perfectly acceptable and even amusing to many viewers in 2022. This shift demonstrated how cultural attitudes toward pandemic content had evolved as the crisis moved from an immediate emergency to a more manageable ongoing situation. Despite finally airing on television, Quarantined Crab was still not immediately added to streaming services. The episode didn't appear on Paramount Plus until the 31st of May 2023, over 3 years after its original production date. This extended streaming ban showed that even after allowing the episode to air on television, Nickelodeon remained cautious about making it easily accessible to audiences. The episode also remained unavailable on DVD releases, making it the only SpongeBob episode that has never been included in a physical media collection. This unique distinction means that despite finally airing on American television, Quarantined Crab remains one of the most difficult SpongeBob episodes for American fans to access legally. Lessons learned and lasting impact. The Quarantined Crab situation created several important precedents for how television networks might handle similar situations in the future. The episode demonstrated that corporate sensitivity to current events can create complex international distribution problems where content produced for one market becomes unavailable in that market while remaining accessible elsewhere. The 2-year American ban showed how real-world events can completely reshape the perception of entertainment content. An episode that would have been unremarkable in 2019 became controversial and eventually historically significant because of external circumstances that had nothing to do with the creator's intentions. The international release pattern proved that different countries and cultures have varying tolerance levels for potentially sensitive content. The fact that dozens of countries aired the episode without controversy while America maintained a complete ban highlighted how cultural attitudes toward media content can vary significantly even among similar societies. The episode's eventual American release and positive reception demonstrated that time can heal the wounds that make content seem inappropriate. What felt insensitive and potentially harmful in April 2020 seemed harmless and even nostalgic by April 2022, showing how rapidly cultural attitudes can shift in response to changing circumstances. The fan community's response to the ban showed how internet culture can circumvent traditional media distribution methods. Despite comprehensive efforts to keep American audiences from seeing the episode, dedicated fans found ways to access it through international sources, creating an underground network of content sharing that operated outside official channels. Summary: Quarantined Crab represents one of the most unusual episodes in SpongeBob SquarePants history, becoming famous not for its content, but for its distribution pattern. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this season 12 episode was banned from American television because its plot about a fictional virus and quarantine seemed too similar to real-world events. However, it was released in other countries, starting with France on the 6th of May 2020, creating the unprecedented situation where international audiences could watch an American-made episode that Americans themselves were forbidden to see. The episode aired in dozens of countries throughout 2020 and 2021, while remaining completely banned in the United States, finally premiering on American television on April 29, 2022, nearly 2 years after its original scheduled air date. This reversal of the typical international broadcasting pattern demonstrated how real-world events can completely reshape media distribution, turning a simple cartoon about fictional clam flu into a case study in corporate sensitivity, cultural differences, and the complex world of global television rights. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Japan's surprising SpongeBob censorship rules. Japan's surprising SpongeBob censorship rules. When most people think about television censorship, they imagine obvious things like violence, bad language, or inappropriate content being removed from shows. But Japan's approach to censoring SpongeBob SquarePants has created some of the most unexpected and puzzling editing decisions in international television history. From completely refusing to air episodes because they contain silent scenes to banning episodes where cartoon characters show their underwear, Japan's SpongeBob censorship rules reveal a unique cultural approach to children's entertainment that has left both fans and industry experts scratching their heads. The most surprising example of Japan's unusual censorship standards involves 2 early SpongeBob episodes that seem completely harmless to most international audiences. Reef Blower has been refused for broadcast in Japan due to its silent scenes, while Ripped Pants was refused for showing SpongeBob getting naked. These decisions demonstrate how different cultures can have vastly different standards for what constitutes appropriate children's content, even when dealing with cartoon sea creatures and clearly fictional underwater scenarios. Japan's censorship of SpongeBob goes far beyond these 2 refused episodes, creating a complex web of cuts, edits, and modifications that transform the viewing experience into something completely different from what American audiences see. Understanding these censorship rules provides fascinating insight into Japanese cultural values, broadcasting standards, and the complex process of adapting American animation for international markets. The silent treatment, why Reef Blower was banned. Perhaps the most bewildering example of Japanese SpongeBob censorship involves the complete refusal to air Reef Blower, one of the earliest episodes from Season 1. This 3-minute episode features SpongeBob using a reef blower to clean his yard, accidentally causing chaos for his neighbor Squidward. The entire episode is essentially silent, with no dialogue except for a single word, you, that appears only as a subtitle on screen without any audio. According to Japanese censorship records, Reef Blower has been refused for broadcast specifically because of its silent scenes. This decision seems particularly strange given that the episode contains no violence, no inappropriate content, and barely any plot beyond SpongeBob making a mess with a leaf blower. The silent nature of the episode, which was actually created for practical production reasons rather than artistic ones, apparently violates some aspect of Japanese broadcasting standards for children's programming. The episode's silence was originally the result of budget constraints rather than creative vision. According to former SpongeBob crew member Jay Lender, Reef Blower was created to extend the pilot episode, Help Wanted, to fill a complete television time slot. However, because they were produced as separate episodes, Screen Actors Guild rules would have required paying the voice actors an additional set of session fees totaling around $2,500. To avoid this expense, the creators decided to make the episode completely silent. This practical decision inadvertently created content that Japanese broadcasters found inappropriate for their audiences. The refusal to air Reef Blower suggests that Japanese censors may have concerns about episodes that don't provide clear dialogue or educational value for children. Silent content might be viewed as confusing or potentially disturbing for young viewers who expect consistent audio-visual stimulation from their television programming. The ban on Reef Blower is particularly puzzling because the episode aired without controversy in dozens of other countries around the world. Most international broadcasters had no problem with the silent format, viewing it as a creative and amusing change of pace from typical SpongeBob episodes. Japan's unique objection to the silent scenes highlights how cultural differences can create unexpected censorship challenges for global media distribution. The underwear incident, Ripped Pants, gets the ban. The refusal to air Ripped Pants represents an even more surprising example of Japanese censorship standards. This season 1 episode follows SpongeBob as he accidentally rips his pants while trying to impress his athletic friends, Sandy and Larry the Lobster. The recurring gag involves SpongeBob's pants tearing to reveal his underwear, which his friends initially find hilarious until the joke becomes repetitive and annoying. Japanese censors refused to broadcast Ripped Pants specifically because it shows SpongeBob getting naked when his pants are ripped. This decision treats cartoon underwear exposure as inappropriate content for children, even though the character in question is a fictional sea sponge and the nudity is completely non-sexual and played for innocent comedy. The episode contains one of SpongeBob's most beloved musical numbers, where he sings about learning that making jokes at inappropriate times can hurt friendships. The song's message about recognizing when humor goes too far and apologizing for mistakes represents exactly the kind of positive moral lesson that children's programming typically aims to deliver. However, this educational content wasn't enough to overcome Japanese concerns about the underwear exposure. The Ripped Pants ban extends beyond just the main episode content. According to Japanese censorship records, any instances of SpongeBob appearing without his square pants in any episode are handled by zooming in on his face to avoid showing his underwear. This creates a systematic approach to avoiding cartoon nudity that affects multiple episodes and creates awkward editing throughout the series. The refusal to air Ripped Pants is particularly notable because underwear jokes are common in many forms of Japanese entertainment, including anime and manga that feature similar physical comedy. The specific objection to SpongeBob's cartoon underwear suggests that different standards may apply to imported American animation versus domestically produced Japanese content. The broader pattern of Japanese SpongeBob censorship, the refusal to air Reef Blower and Ripped Pants, represents just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Japanese SpongeBob censorship. Multiple episodes have been completely banned from Japanese television, while many others have been heavily edited to remove content deemed inappropriate for local audiences. Midlife Crustacean has been refused for broadcast in Japan due to its references to and depiction of women's underwear. This episode features the infamous panty raid scene where Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, and Patrick break into a house to steal underwear. While this episode has been controversial in multiple countries and was eventually pulled from American broadcasts as well, Japan's early recognition of its inappropriate content demonstrates their particularly strict standards regarding anything related to underwear or intimate clothing. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy V has also been refused for broadcast in Japan due to references to sexual content. The specific nature of these references isn't clearly documented, but the complete ban suggests that even minor adult themes or innuendos that might go over children's heads are considered unacceptable for Japanese audiences. The pattern of complete episode bans reveals that Japanese censors prefer to remove potentially problematic content entirely rather than editing it to make it acceptable. This approach differs from many other countries that use strategic cuts and modifications to preserve as much content as possible while removing specific problematic scenes. Extensive content modifications. Beyond the completely banned episodes, Japanese broadcasts of SpongeBob feature extensive modifications that significantly alter the viewing experience. These changes range from minor dialogue adjustments to major scene removals, creating a version of SpongeBob that is substantially different from the original American broadcasts. Violence-related content receives particularly heavy censorship in Japanese SpongeBob broadcasts. Any instances where Squidward gets hurt are typically cut from episodes, removing a significant source of physical comedy that is common throughout the series. This includes scenes where Squidward is injured, embarrassed, or suffers mishaps as a result of SpongeBob and Patrick's antics. Musical content also faces extensive modification. SpongeBob and Patrick singing "The Blue Danube" is removed from episodes, though the reasoning for this specific cut is unclear. The children's ABC song is changed to popular ukulele music, suggesting a preference for Japanese musical styles over American educational songs. Even seemingly innocent content faces modification. When Sandy asks, "SpongeBob doesn't have hair, or does he?" the Japanese version cuts out the "or does he" portion, leaving only "SpongeBob doesn't have hair." This suggests that even minor questions or uncertainty might be viewed as potentially confusing for children. Scenes involving jellyfishes buzzing SpongeBob and Patrick are removed, possibly due to concerns about depicting insects or creatures in threatening situations. Mr. Krabs appearing with a bra in dialogue is cut entirely, eliminating any reference to women's undergarments regardless of context. Cultural context and broadcasting standards. Japan's extensive SpongeBob censorship reflects broader cultural attitudes toward children's entertainment and broadcasting standards that differ significantly from American approaches. Japanese children's programming traditionally emphasizes clear moral lessons, educational content, and avoiding anything that might confuse or disturb young viewers. The emphasis on removing content that might be unclear or ambiguous, such as silent scenes or questioning dialogue, suggests that Japanese broadcasters prefer programming that provides consistent, straightforward messages for children. Ambiguity or uncertainty, even in harmless contexts, may be viewed as potentially problematic for developing minds. The strict standards regarding nudity and underwear, even in cartoon contexts, reflect Japanese cultural attitudes toward modesty and appropriate behavior. While Japan has complex cultural attitudes toward nudity in different contexts, children's programming appears to maintain extremely conservative standards that eliminate any exposure of undergarments or naked bodies, regardless of how innocent or cartoon-like the depiction might be. The removal of physical comedy involving character injury demonstrates concern about children imitating dangerous or harmful behaviors they see on television. This approach assumes that even cartoon violence might influence real-world behavior, leading to preventive censorship that removes potentially imitable content. International broadcasting implications. Japan's unique approach to SpongeBob censorship highlights the complex challenges faced by international broadcasters when adapting American animation for global audiences. While most countries make minor adjustments for local cultural sensitivities, Japan's extensive modifications create a viewing experience that is fundamentally different from the original content. The economic implications of such extensive censorship are significant. Completely refusing to air episodes means that broadcasters lose content they have paid licensing fees to acquire. Extensive editing requires additional production costs and staff time to create modified versions specifically for Japanese audiences. The creative implications are equally important. When episodes are heavily edited or completely banned, the original creator's artistic vision is compromised or lost entirely. SpongeBob creator Steven Hillenburg's carefully crafted episodes become significantly different products when filtered through Japanese censorship standards. The cultural implications extend beyond just television content. Japanese children who grow up watching heavily censored SpongeBob experience a different version of American culture than children in other countries. This creates variations in shared cultural references and understanding that can affect international communication and cultural exchange. Fan and industry response. The extensive Japanese censorship of SpongeBob has generated significant discussion among fans and industry professionals who are aware of the modifications. International SpongeBob fan communities often share information about which content has been cut or banned in different countries, with Japan frequently cited as having some of the most restrictive standards. Some fans have criticized the extensive censorship as being overly protective and unnecessary, arguing that the removed content is harmless and that Japanese children are being denied access to beloved episodes and scenes that are enjoyed worldwide. Others defend the censorship as reflecting legitimate cultural differences and appropriate caution about children's content. Industry professionals have noted that Japan's approach represents one extreme in the spectrum of international content modification. While all countries make some adjustments to imported content, Japan's willingness to completely ban episodes and make extensive cuts demonstrates a particularly cautious approach that prioritizes local cultural standards over preserving original content. The situation has also sparked broader discussions about cultural imperialism and the challenge of creating globally acceptable content. Some argue that American animation should be more sensitive to international cultural standards from the beginning, while others contend that extensive foreign censorship undermines the creative integrity of the original work. Comparison with other countries. Japan's SpongeBob censorship stands out as particularly extensive when compared to other international markets. While many countries make minor edits for cultural sensitivity or time constraints, few match Japan's willingness to completely ban episodes or make major content modifications. Countries like the United Kingdom typically focus their censorship on rapid flashing lights that might trigger seizures and scenes involving imitable dangerous behavior like hot grills or broken glass. These modifications are based on specific safety concerns rather than broad cultural objections to content themes. India has made modifications related to nudity and cultural sensitivity, such as blurring characters' underwear or modifying scenes that might conflict with local religious or cultural values. However, these changes are typically less extensive than Japan's comprehensive approach. Most European countries air SpongeBob with minimal modifications, focusing primarily on language dubbing rather than content censorship. This suggests that Japan's concerns about silent scenes, underwear exposure, and physical comedy are not shared by most other international markets. The future of international censorship. Japan's approach to SpongeBob censorship provides insight into the ongoing challenges of international media distribution in an increasingly globalized world. As streaming services make content more globally accessible, the differences between national censorship standards become more apparent and potentially problematic. The rise of digital distribution platforms creates new questions about whether content should be modified for different regional markets or whether global standards should be developed. Japan's extensive SpongeBob modifications demonstrate that significant cultural differences in content standards remain even for seemingly universal children's entertainment. The economic pressures of global content distribution may eventually force producers to either create more universally acceptable content from the beginning or accept that different regions will have significantly different versions of their programming. Japan's willingness to extensively modify or completely ban content suggests that cultural differences in children's entertainment standards remain strong despite globalization pressures. Japan's surprising SpongeBob censorship rules have created one of the most extensive and unusual examples of international content modification in television history. Reef Blower has been refused for broadcast in Japan due to its silent scenes, while Ripped Pants was refused for showing SpongeBob getting naked, demonstrating cultural standards that differ dramatically from most international markets. Beyond these complete bans, Japanese broadcasts feature extensive modifications, including removal of physical comedy involving character injury, elimination of underwear references, cuts to musical content, and modifications to dialogue that might create ambiguity or uncertainty. These comprehensive changes reflect Japanese cultural attitudes toward children's programming that emphasize clear moral lessons, educational value, and avoiding content that might confuse or potentially influence young viewers. While most countries make minor adjustments to imported SpongeBob content, Japan's willingness to completely ban episodes and make extensive modifications creates a viewing experience that is fundamentally different from the original American version, highlighting the complex challenges of adapting entertainment content for diverse global audiences with varying cultural standards and broadcasting requirements. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have UK's lightning flash censorship for epilepsy protection. UK's lightning flash censorship for epilepsy protection. Imagine watching your favorite TV show when suddenly rapid flashing lights trigger a medical emergency. Hundreds of Japanese children collapsing after watching Pokémonday BBC breaking the law with an Olympic logo. Emergency hospital visits from a single advertisement, and all because of something as simple as lights flashing on screen. This is the hidden world of UK flash censorship, MC, a complex system designed to protect viewers with photosensitive epilepsy from seizures that could literally be life-threatening. Can you imagine how strict these rules have to be when a single mistake can send people to the hospital? I was certainly shocked by the scientific precision behind these regulations when I researched this topic, so if you're ready to discover how the UK became the world leader in protecting epileptic viewers through some of the most detailed censorship guidelines ever created, sit back, relax, maybe dim those lights for safety, and let's begin. The science behind the seizures. Before we dive into how the UK censors content, we need to understand exactly what photosensitive epilepsy is and why it's so dangerous. Photosensitive epilepsy affects a small percentage of all epilepsy sufferers, but the consequences can be devastating. When someone with this condition sees rapidly flashing lights or specific patterns on screen, their brain can misfire catastrophically. What starts as simple light signals becomes a medical emergency. The seizures aren't just brief fainting spells. They can cause physical injuries, facial trauma, concussions, and in extreme cases, can be fatal. A single seizure can force someone to surrender their driving license, destroying their independence, employment prospects, and social life in an instant. The science is precise and terrifying. Research shows that flashing lights between 330 Hz are most dangerous, with the peak danger zone around 15 to 20 flashes per second. Red flashes are particularly problematic, a lesson learned through tragedy in Japan. But here's what makes it even more sinister. The effects aren't limited to people with diagnosed epilepsy. Studies found that 5 to 10% of viewers can experience mild symptoms like headaches, dizziness, and nausea from problematic flashing content. The Pokémon incident that changed everything. The 16th of December, 1997, became the most infamous date in television history for photosensitive epilepsy awareness. TV Tokyo aired an episode of Pokémon called Electric Soldier Porygon that would never be broadcast again anywhere in the world. The episode seemed harmless enough. Ash and friends travel into cyberspace to stop Team Rocket. But during the climactic battle scene, the animators used a technique called Paka Paka to create tension through rapidly alternating red and blue flashing lights. The moment those lights hit Japanese television screens, chaos erupted across the country. Children watching at home began experiencing blurred vision, headaches, dizziness, and nausea. Hundreds started having seizures, some lost consciousness, others suffered temporary blindness. The numbers are staggering. 685 children required emergency ambulance treatment, with over 700 total hospitalizations reported. The real horror? Some children had seizures just from watching news reports that showed clips of the offending scene. The incident earned a Guinness World Record for most photosensitive epileptic seizures caused by a television show. Nintendo's stock plummeted. The entire Pokémon series went on hiatus for 4 months. And Porygon, explained, the titular character, has never had a major role in the anime since, despite not being the actual cause of the flashing lights. The aftermath revolutionized animation worldwide. Studios across Japan and globally began implementing strict guidelines about flashing effects. The traditional light backing tables used for animation effects were gradually phased out in favor of digital alternatives. Warning messages about watching television in well-lit rooms at safe distances became standard. Most importantly for our story, this incident directly influenced the development of modern UK flash censorship guidelines. UK legal framework, making safety law. Unlike many countries that rely on voluntary guidelines, the UK has made flash censorship a legal requirement with serious consequences for violations. The foundation comes from UK disability discrimination laws. Failing to protect people with epilepsy isn't just poor practice. It's illegal discrimination against disabled people. This legal framework gives UK regulations teeth that voluntary guidelines lack. Ofcom, the UK's communications regulator, enforces Broadcasting Code Rule 2.12, which states, television broadcasters must take precautions to maintain a low level of risk to viewers who have photosensitive epilepsy. The rule continues with a crucial caveat: where it is not reasonably practicable to follow the Ofcom guidance, and where broadcasters can demonstrate that the broadcasting of flashing lights and divided by or patterns is editorially justified, viewers should be given an adequate verbal and also, if appropriate, text warning at the start of the program or program item. This isn't just a suggestion, it's legally binding with financial penalties for violations. Ofcom actively investigates complaints and issues public rulings when broadcasters breach these requirements. The Advertising Standards Authority, ASA, applies similar rules to advertising content, working with Ofcom's technical specialists to analyze problematic content. Beyond television, the UK's public sector bodies' regulations require government websites and online content to comply with accessibility guidelines that include flash protection. The Harding Test: Scientific Precision in Censorship. At the heart of UK flash censorship lies the Harding Test, a sophisticated technical analysis named after Professor Graham Harding, one of the world's leading experts on photosensitive epilepsy. The Harding Flash and Pattern Analyzer, FPA test, examines every frame of video content for potentially dangerous elements. It doesn't just count flashes, it analyzes flash frequency, how many flashes occur per second, flash area, how much of the screen is affected, luminance changes, the brightness differences between flashes, color combinations, particularly dangerous red flashes, pattern analysis, static patterns that could trigger seizures, cumulative effects, extended sequences that build up risk over time. The test is so sophisticated it can detect problems invisible to human reviewers. A sequence might look harmless but contain technical parameters that exceed safety thresholds. Here's where it gets really technical. The guidelines specify that general flashing should not exceed 3 flashes within 1 second, or should be below specific luminance thresholds. Red flashing has even stricter limits due to its higher risk profile. But the Harding test has limitations. Recent incidents, including a 2024 O2 advertisement that passed the test but still caused concern in the epilepsy community, have highlighted that current testing might not catch all potentially problematic content. Real-world enforcement, when broadcasters break the rules. The UK's flash censorship isn't just theoretical. Ofcom regularly investigates violations and issues public rulings that demonstrate how seriously these rules are taken. The BBC Olympic logo scandal. In 2007, the BBC broke broadcast rules during coverage of the London 2012 Olympics logo launch. The promotional video showed the controversial angular logo diving into a swimming pool using rapid flashing effects. Ofcom received 8 complaints, including one from the British Epilepsy Association. When tested, most of the video was found to be safe, but a brief 45-frame sequence lasting about 2 seconds contained an excessive number of flashes that clearly breached guidelines. Ofcom's ruling was uncompromising. Irrespective of the source, it is the responsibility of the broadcaster to ensure that material it transmits complies with Ofcom's broadcasting code. This responsibility is particularly important where there is the potential to harm viewers. The BBC was found in breach of Rule 2.13 and had to issue public apologies. The Citroën advertisement case. In 2012, the ASA upheld complaints about a television advertisement for Citroën cars featuring the word "yes" flashing repeatedly on an orange background. Ofcom's technical analysis found the ad breached 3 separate technical parameters for safe flashing. The case demonstrated that even simple text flashing could be dangerous if it exceeded safety thresholds. The Voice UK violation. BBC One's The Voice UK The Live Final was found in breach of the broadcasting code in September 2015 for excessive flashing during the live broadcast. The case showed that even live television must maintain safety standards. Between 2005 and 2021, Ofcom found 30 instances of television broadcasts that exceeded PSE guidelines, with 80% of complaints submitted directly by viewers, showing that the epilepsy community actively monitors and reports dangerous content. Content editing, the invisible protection. While viewers never see the original dangerous content, the editing process that removes harmful flashing is extensive and technically complex. Editors use specialized software to analyze every frame for problematic elements. When dangerous flashing is detected, several techniques can make content safe. Darkening effects, reducing the brightness of flashing sequences to bring them below danger thresholds. This is often invisible to viewers, but technically crucial for safety. Slowing down, reducing the speed of flashing effects so they fall below the critical 3 flashes per second threshold. Shrinking areas, making flashing effects cover smaller portions of the screen to reduce their impact. Color shifts, changing dangerous red flashes to safer colors or reducing color saturation. Complete removal. In severe cases, removing flashing sequences entirely and replacing them with static images or alternative effects. Pattern modification, altering geometric patterns, stripes, or concentric circles that could trigger seizures. The editing is so sophisticated that most viewers never realize content has been modified for their protection. International influence, UK standards go global. The UK's flash censorship guidelines have become an international gold standard, influencing regulations worldwide. The International Telecommunications Union, ITUR-BT 1702, incorporates principles developed from UK research. The Epilepsy Foundation of America's 2005 guidelines align closely with British recommendations. However, international standards aren't uniform. Japan has more conservative guidelines for some types of content, but more permissive rules for moderate flashing. Tools used internationally must account for these regional differences. The UK approach of combining legal requirements with technical precision has been particularly influential. Countries developing new guidelines often reference Ofcom's framework and the Harding test methodology. Beyond television, the digital challenge. While television content is strictly regulated, the rise of online content has created new challenges for flash censorship. Social media platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter host millions of videos that may contain dangerous flashing content. Unlike television, there's no systematic pre-screening process. The problem became tragically clear in May 2020 when the Epilepsy Society faced a coordinated cyber attack. Internet trolls flooded the charity's social media accounts with hundreds of flashing GIFs specifically designed to trigger seizures in people with epilepsy. The attack even targeted an 8-year-old boy named Zach Eagling, who has epilepsy and cerebral palsy. This led to calls for Zach's Law, proposed legislation that would make it a criminal offense to intentionally send flashing images to someone with epilepsy. The UK's Law Commission has recommended that such attacks become a specific criminal offense, but this hasn't yet become law. Technical evolution, AI, and automated detection. Modern flash censorship increasingly relies on artificial intelligence and automated detection systems. Advanced algorithms can analyze video content in real time, automatically flagging potentially dangerous sequences for human review. Machine learning systems trained on thousands of hours of content can identify subtle patterns that might trigger seizures. These systems are becoming sophisticated enough to distinguish between editorially justified flashing like emergency vehicle lights in news footage, and gratuitous effects that could be easily modified. Some platforms are experimenting with user-controlled settings that would automatically filter or warn about flashing content based on individual sensitivity levels. The imitable violence factor. UK flash censorship extends beyond epilepsy protection to include concerns about imitable violence, content that viewers might copy in real life. Ofcom guidelines specifically prohibit content that glorifies or instructs viewers in dangerous behavior. This includes weapons training, detailed instructions on using weapons or fighting techniques, dangerous stunts, activities that untrained viewers might attempt to replicate self-harm methods, content that could provide instructions for suicide or self-injury, criminal techniques, step-by-step guides to illegal activities. The key test is whether content could realistically be imitated by viewers and cause harm. Context matters enormously. The same action might be acceptable in an educational documentary but prohibited in entertainment content. This aspect of UK censorship operates more subjectively than the technical precision of flash detection, requiring editorial judgment about potential social harm. Industry impact, the hidden costs of safety. UK flash censorship creates significant but largely invisible costs for the media industry. Every piece of content must be tested using specialized equipment and software. The Harding FPA test requires expensive technical analysis, and content that fails must be re-edited and retested. For international content, distributors must create UK-specific versions with flashing sequences modified. This means additional post-production costs and potential creative compromises. Live broadcasts face particular challenges as there's no opportunity for pre-testing. Broadcasters must train technical staff to identify potentially dangerous content in real time and have systems ready to quickly cut away or modify live feeds. The advertising industry has adapted by incorporating flash testing into standard pre-production workflows. Clearcast, which approves most British television advertising, has made flash analysis routine. Despite these costs, the industry generally supports the regulations. The alternative, facing legal liability for causing seizures, UIDO, would be far more expensive than prevention. Global variations, different countries, different standards. While the UK leads in flash censorship, international approaches vary significantly. United States, relies more on voluntary industry guidelines than legal requirements. The major networks have adopted similar standards to the UK, but enforcement is less systematic. Japan has the strictest guidelines in some areas, implementing comprehensive changes after the Pokemon incident. All anime content is now screened for problematic effects. European Union, variable standards across member states, with some countries following UK-style approaches and others having minimal requirements. Australia generally follows UK guidelines for content classification and broadcast standards. Germany, strong emphasis on protecting children from harmful content, including flash-related dangers. The lack of global standardization creates challenges for international content distribution, as different versions may be required for different markets. Future challenges: VR, gaming, and new media. Emerging technologies pose new challenges for flash censorship that current regulations don't fully address. Virtual reality headsets create immersive environments where flashing content could be more dangerous due to the wider field of view and closer proximity to users' eyes. Current testing methods may not accurately assess VR-specific risks. Video games increasingly feature rapid flashing effects during action sequences. While console manufacturers have some guidelines, mobile gaming and indie development often lack systematic flash screening. Live streaming platforms allow real-time content creation with no pre-screening. Streamers might inadvertently create dangerous flashing content during gameplay or while using visual effects. Augmented reality applications could overlay flashing effects onto real-world environments in unpredictable ways. The UK is researching how to extend current protections to these new media formats while avoiding stifling innovation. The human cost: real stories behind the regulations. Behind every technical specification and legal requirement are real people whose lives have been affected by photosensitive epilepsy. The regulations exist because flashing lights aren't just annoying, they're genuinely dangerous. A single exposure can trigger seizures that cause physical injuries. Falls during seizures can cause broken bones, head injuries, and facial trauma. Social isolation: fear of unexpected triggers leads some people to avoid public spaces, entertainment venues, and social gatherings. Employment challenges: certain careers become impossible for people with photosensitive epilepsy. Educational barriers: classroom presentations or educational videos with flashing content can exclude affected students. Psychological impact: constant vigilance about potential triggers creates anxiety and stress. The 2020 cyber attacks on the Epilepsy Society demonstrated the malicious potential of flashing content. Attackers specifically targeted people celebrating periods of seizure freedom, attempting to trigger new episodes. These human costs explain why UK regulations are so comprehensive and why violations are taken so seriously. Testing and technology: the science of safety. Modern flash detection technology has become incredibly sophisticated, but it's still not perfect. The Harding test analyzes multiple parameters simultaneously. Spatial analysis: how much of the screen is affected by flashing. Temporal analysis: the timing and frequency of flashes. Luminance measurements: the brightness changes between states. Color space analysis: specific attention to dangerous red combinations. Pattern recognition: detection of regular geometric patterns that could trigger seizures. However, recent incidents suggest that current testing may miss some dangerous content. The O2 advertisement controversy highlighted that passing standard tests doesn't guarantee complete safety. Researchers are developing more sophisticated analysis methods, including biometric testing, using EEG monitoring to directly measure brain responses to content. Population studies, testing content with larger, more diverse groups of people with photosensitive epilepsy. Machine learning, training AI systems on thousands of hours of known, safe, and dangerous content. Real-world monitoring, tracking actual seizure incidents to identify patterns missed by laboratory testing. The goal is to create testing methods that are more accurate while remaining practical for industry use. Industry adaptation, how content creators respond. The UK's flash censorship requirements have fundamentally changed how content is created, not just edited after production. Pre-production planning. Directors and cinematographers now consider flash safety during the creative process, avoiding techniques that would require extensive post-production modification. Animation guidelines. Studios have developed internal standards that go beyond legal requirements, training animators to create visually exciting content without dangerous flashing. Live production protocols. Television studios have installed real-time monitoring systems that can detect dangerous flashing during live broadcasts and automatically modify feeds. International versions. Major productions now create multiple versions during initial production rather than editing afterward, reducing costs and creative compromises. Technology integration. New cameras and editing software include built-in flash detection tools that alert creators to potential problems during production. The industry has largely embraced these changes, recognizing that prevention is more efficient than correction. Legal, precedents, and enforcement actions. UK flash censorship enforcement extends beyond simple rule violations to include legal liability for harm caused. While most cases are resolved through regulatory action, there have been civil liability concerns when content causes actual seizures. The potential for personal injury lawsuits provides additional incentive for compliance beyond regulatory requirements. Insurance companies now require evidence of proper flash testing for media liability coverage. Production companies that skip safety testing may find themselves without legal protection if their content causes harm. The legal framework continues evolving. Proposed legislation would make malicious flashing content attacks a specific criminal offense, extending protection beyond traditional broadcast media. International distribution contracts increasingly include warranties about flash safety compliance, making it a commercial as well as legal issue. The invisible success, measuring prevention. One challenge in evaluating UK flash censorship is that success is largely invisible, seizures that don't happen because dangerous content was edited. However, some metrics suggest the system works. Incident reduction. Reports of television-triggered seizures have dropped dramatically since systematic guidelines were implemented. Industry compliance. The vast majority of content now passes flash testing without requiring modification. International adoption. Other countries increasingly adopt UK-style approaches, suggesting they're recognized as effective technology integration. Flash safety has become routine in production workflows, rather than an afterthought. The UK's approach has arguably prevented hundreds or thousands of seizures that would have occurred without systematic content modification. The UK's lightning flash censorship system represents one of the most sophisticated examples of invisible protection in modern media. Every day, millions of viewers watch content that has been carefully analyzed and modified to protect the small percentage of people who could be seriously harmed by flashing lights. The system works through a combination of legal requirements, technical precision, industry cooperation, and genuine commitment to protecting vulnerable viewers. It demonstrates how effective regulation can balance creative freedom with public safety. From the tragedy of the Pokemon incident to the technical sophistication of modern flash detection, this hidden world of censorship shows how scientific understanding can be translated into practical protection. The next time you watch television in the UK, remember that every flashing light, every strobe effect, every rapid scene change has been carefully analyzed by experts to ensure it won't trigger a medical emergency. It's censorship you'll never notice, and that's exactly how it should be. The ultimate measure of successful flash censorship isn't what gets removed, but what never needs to be, because creators have learned to make exciting, visually stunning content that's safe for everyone to watch. In a world where technology constantly creates new ways for content to potentially harm viewers, the UK's approach provides a model for invisible protection that prioritizes human safety while preserving creative expression. The lights may be flashing on your screen, but they're flashing safely, and that makes all the difference. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Bob Esponja versus SpongeBob. Bob Esponja versus SpongeBob, the Spanish translation chronicles. SpongeBob becomes Bob Esponja. Patrick transforms into Patricio, and Squidward emerges as Calamardo. The Krusty Krab turns into El Crustaceo Cascarudo, while Krabby Patties become Changra Burgers. And these are just 3 examples of the fascinating linguistic transformation that happened when SpongeBob SquarePants sailed from Bikini Bottom to Fondo de Bikini. Can you imagine all the creative decisions, cultural adaptations, and translation challenges that emerged when this beloved American cartoon crossed into Spanish-speaking territories over 25 years ago? I was certainly amazed by the depth of localization effort I discovered when researching this topic. So if you're ready to dive deep into how Bob Esponja became a cultural phenomenon in its own right, spanning 2 different Spanish markets with distinct approaches, sit back, relax, maybe grab a Changra burger, and let's begin. Let's start with the tale of how SpongeBob got his Spanish name. The birth of Bob Esponja when translation meets localization. The journey from SpongeBob SquarePants to Bob Esponja represents one of the most successful cartoon localizations in Spanish-speaking territories. But this wasn't simply a matter of direct translation, it was a complete cultural reimagining. SpongeBob SquarePants' full name in Spanish becomes Bob Esponja Pantalones Cuadrados, but the genius lies in how translators approach the core concept. Rather than keeping the English SpongeBob, they chose Bob Esponja, literally Bob Sponge, which sounds more natural to Spanish speakers while maintaining the character's friendly, approachable personality. This decision reveals the fundamental difference between translation and localization. A literal translation might have produced Esponja Roberto Pantalones Cuadrados, but that would sound awkward and foreign. Instead, the character is simply called Bob countless times throughout the Latin American version, creating a sense of familiarity that resonates with Spanish-speaking audiences. The translation teams understood something crucial. For SpongeBob to succeed in Spanish markets, he couldn't feel like an American import with Spanish words. He needed to feel like he belonged in Fondo de Bikini from the very beginning. 2 worlds, 2 approaches, European versus Latin American, Spanish. One of the most fascinating aspects of Bob Esponja's Spanish journey is that there are actually 2 completely separate Spanish versions, one for Spain, European Spanish, and another for Latin America. These aren't just different dubs, they're distinct cultural interpretations of the same source material. The European Spanish dub made its debut on Nickelodeon Spain on the 4th of March 2000, while the Latin American version debuted on Nickelodeon Latin America on the 7th of February 2000, just weeks apart, showing how eager Spanish markets were to bring this phenomenon to their audiences. The character name choices reveal interesting cultural preferences. Mr. Krabs, in Spain, he's Señor Cangrejo, while in Latin America, he's Don Cangrejo. This subtle difference reflects regional formality preferences, Señor being more formal European usage, while Don carries the respectful but familiar tone common in Latin American culture. Sandy Cheeks becomes Aranita Mejillas in both versions, a charming translation that captures both her sandy nature and her Texas personality through the diminutive "ita" suffix that Spanish speakers use affectionately. The Krusty Krab. Here's where regional differences really shine. In Spain, it's Crustaceo Crujiente, while in some contexts it becomes El Crustaceo Cascarudo. both maintaining the alliterative quality of the original while sounding distinctly Spanish. The art of character, name translation, linguistic creativity. The Spanish translation team faced a unique challenge. How do you translate character names that are often puns, wordplay, or cultural references? The solutions they developed showcase remarkable linguistic creativity. Squidward equals Calamardo. This might be the most brilliant character name adaptation in the entire series. Calamardo comes from calamar, squid, combined with the suffix ardo, creating a name that not only identifies his species but also sounds like a grumpy, pretentious character name in Spanish. It captures Squidward's personality perfectly while being immediately understandable to Spanish speakers. Interestingly, in some episodes like Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful and I Dancing, Squidward is called Calamarino, from calamar, squid, and ino, a Spanish suffix for small objects. This shows how translators continued to experiment with character naming even after the series was established. Patrick equals Patricio. This is a straightforward adaptation, taking the English Patrick and giving it the Spanish equivalent Patricio. Patrick Star becomes Patricio Estrella, maintaining both the character's simple, friendly nature and his celestial surname. But the translation team didn't stop at main characters. Even minor characters received careful attention. Perch Perkins becomes Perka Perkins, showing how translators maintained character consistency throughout the series. Food translation, the Kangarburger phenomenon. One of the most significant localization challenges involved food, specifically the iconic Krabby Patty. This wasn't just about finding Spanish words. It was about creating a food item that would feel natural and appealing to Spanish-speaking audiences. The Krabby Patty becomes Changerburger, a brilliant fusion of cangrejo, crab, and hamburger. This hybrid word perfectly captures the item's nature while maintaining its appeal. Spanish speakers immediately understand it's a crab-based burger, and the partial English burger gives it an international, trendy feeling. The Kangarburger became the characteristic and popular food of El Crustáceo Cascarudo in Bob Esponja, described as a type of hamburger made with buns, underwater vegetables, mustard, ketchup, and a patty. The Spanish wiki even notes specific details about how Kangarburgers function in the show's universe, showing how thoroughly the Spanish-speaking audience embraced this cultural adaptation. The translation even addressed pricing inconsistencies that appeared in the original series. The price of a Kangarburger changes constantly throughout the series, with a notable price change in the SpongeBob movie where they cost more than $99. Spanish audiences were paying just as much attention to these details as English speakers. Location translation, from Bikini Bottom to Fondo de Bikini. The underwater setting required its own translation strategy. Bikini Bottom became Fondo de Bikini, literally bottom of bikini, which maintains the original reference while making grammatical sense in Spanish. This wasn't always perfectly executed. In The Ballad of Filthy Muck, the narrator accidentally said Parque de Bikini Bottom instead of Parque de Fondo de Bikini, Bikini Bottom Park. Speaking half Spanish and half English, which the wiki notes as ironic. Other locations received similar treatment. Glove World was translated as Mundo del Guante until season 11, when it was renamed to Mundo Guante without the del of. This shows how translation preferences evolved over time, perhaps favoring shorter, more modern-sounding names. Random Land became Sin Rumbolandia in the European Spanish version, which translates literally to No Course Land. This creative adaptation maintains the chaotic, directionless nature of the original location while making perfect sense to Spanish speakers. Voice acting excellence, the people behind Bob Esponja. The Spanish versions of SpongeBob succeeded not just because of excellent translation, but because of exceptional voice acting that brought these characters to life for Spanish-speaking audiences. Luis Geraldo Carreño Pinango, is a Venezuelan actor best known for playing SpongeBob SquarePants, or Bob Esponja, in the Latin American version, replacing Cahiamal Martinez in the second season. After finishing his voice work for the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, in 2015, he moved to Miami, Florida, where he continues to voice SpongeBob while the rest of the cast still works in Caracas. This geographical split created a unique production challenge. Luis Carreño had to record his lines separately from the rest of the cast, yet maintain the chemistry and timing that makes SpongeBob's interactions work. The fact that the show's quality remained consistent despite this logistical complexity speaks to both Carreño's skill and the production team's dedication. Alex Saudinos, the European Spanish SpongeBob voice actor, became so associated with the character that on the 13th of September 2011, he defended the entire series against a now-defunct studio that stated SpongeBob could lead to attention deficit in younger viewers. This shows how personally invested these voice actors became in protecting the characters they brought to life. Alberto Closas Jr. voices Squidward in Spain, though between the second half of Season 5 and the first few episodes of Season 6, he was temporarily replaced by Miguel Campos due to being fired from the dubbing studio because of budget cuts. The fact that he was rehired demonstrates how crucial specific voice actors became to the Spanish version's identity. Production challenges, the Venezuelan connection. The Latin American Spanish version has a particularly fascinating production story rooted in Venezuela's dubbing industry. The dubbing began production around the end of 1999 at the Etc. Group studio in Caracas, Venezuela, and initially didn't have an artistic director. Actors directed themselves with the help of a recording engineer. This self-directed approach created a unique dynamic. Like almost all productions dubbed in Caracas at the time, each actor was directed while some actors worked on the technical operation. It wasn't until Walter Velez entered as artistic director starting with Season 8 that the show had proper dubbing direction. The Venezuelan economic and political situation significantly impacted the production. Heading into the second season, several actors had to leave the production due to their intentions to form a small union seeking fair salary. As a result, they were fired by Etc. Group. Many voice actors also left Venezuela to migrate to other countries, creating ongoing casting challenges. By 2008, actors Annabella Silva and Ezequiel Serrano retired from dubbing and moved to London, requiring their roles to be dubbed by other actors. This pattern of Venezuelan voice actors emigrating became a recurring theme throughout the show's production history. Cultural adaptation, more than just words. The Spanish versions of SpongeBob succeeded because they went beyond literal translation to embrace cultural adaptation. This included everything from humor styles to cultural references that Spanish speakers would understand and appreciate. In Pizza Delivery, when SpongeBob says, "That lucky customer is going to have the first Krabby Patty pizza ever," the Spanish version says, "Ese cliente afortunado va a llevarse la primera." Kangaroo Burger, "That lucky customer is going to carry off divided by take the first Krabby Patty," when it should have said something like, "Ese cliente afortunado va a llevarse la primera Kangaroo pizza." This shows how even small translation decisions could impact continuity within the Spanish version. The episode Pat the Horse was translated to Arre Patricio, which means "Giddy up, Patrick," a translation that captures both the episode's content and uses an expression that Spanish speakers would immediately understand and find amusing. Some cultural adaptations were more complex. In the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, the chum bucket isn't called Cubo de Sebo, literal translation, but Cubo Amigo, which translates to friendly bucket. This change suggests the translators wanted to make Plankton's restaurant sound more appealing, perhaps to make the rivalry with the Krusty Krab more believable. Technical translation challenges. when languages collide. Translating an animated series presents unique technical challenges that don't exist in live-action content. The Spanish Bob Esponja teams had to work within the constraints of existing animation while making everything sound natural in Spanish. Due to text not being translated directly in the animation, translations for said text are read by a narrator. This means that any written English text appearing on screen had to be verbally translated by an off-screen narrator, creating a different viewing experience than the original. The title cards aren't edited with their respective language. Instead, the translated episode title is read by a narrator. This technical limitation meant that Spanish viewers heard episode titles but continued to see English text on screen, a compromise between cost and accessibility. Some episodes presented special challenges. In Truth or Square, the TV special, the songs are in English instead of Spanish, though they are given translations in the form of subtitles for Clan TV airings. This created an inconsistent viewing experience where Spanish viewers heard English songs while reading Spanish subtitles. Dubbing disasters and happy accidents. Like any long-running production, the Spanish versions experienced their share of mistakes, accidents, and behind-the-scenes drama that occasionally made it onto the screen. In Back to the Past, Squilliam was confused for Squidward by the dubbing crew and was called Calamardo, even having the same voice actor as Squidward, Alberto Clausis Jr. This kind of mistake shows how complex it can be to maintain character consistency across hundreds of episodes and multiple voice actors. In Rodeo Days, Plankton is dubbed by Alberto Clausis Jr., the voice of Squidward, likely because Juan Rueda, Plankton's usual voice, was either ill or had something important to attend on the recording day. These practical challenges required constant adaptation. In Squidville, when SpongeBob says "any second now," this dialogue is not spoken. Whether this was an intentional edit or an oversight, it shows how the Spanish versions sometimes differed from the original in unexpected ways. Cultural impact. Bob Esponja as a Spanish phenomenon. The Spanish versions of SpongeBob didn't just translate an American show. They created a cultural phenomenon that became distinctly Spanish-speaking. The Latin American version has aired on 49 different networks, showing the incredible reach and popularity of Bob Esponja across Spanish-speaking countries. On Nicktoons airings, seasons 5, 6, some episodes of season 7, It's a SpongeBob Christmas, some episodes of season 9, and the last 2 episodes of season 10 are in PAL pitch due to the feed being merged with Nicktoons Global after 2017. This technical detail shows how complex international distribution became as the show's popularity grew. The show's impact extended beyond television. There was a Spanish DVD pack that contained 10 DVDs, the first 3 seasons and a movie, to promote the belated 10th anniversary in 2010, shaped and painted to look like a Kangaroo burger. Though it was misspelled Kangaroo burger, even merchandising mistakes became part of Bob Esponja's cultural footprint. Regional broadcasting evolution. The Spanish version's broadcasting history reflects the changing landscape of international television. The European Spanish version has aired on Antena 3, La One, Cuatro, and Neox, and is currently airing on Nickelodeon Commercial Light and Clan. On the 1st of September 2009, the dub began to simulcast with the European Portuguese dub due to a proposed merger with the European Portuguese feed, renamed Nickelodeon Iberia. Later, in March 2020, both feeds merged with the Walloon feed, which airs the French dub, commencing in April and being renamed Nickelodeon Commercial Light. This evolution from separate national feeds to merged regional broadcasts reflects the economic realities of modern international television distribution, censorship and content adaptation. Unlike some international versions of American shows, the Spanish Bob Esponja versions maintained remarkable fidelity to the original content. The European Spanish version does not have any censorship. All episodes are dubbed and are aired. However, there were some exceptions. Between 2016 and 2017, Clan TV started to censor episodes of the series, mainly from the first seasons, broadcasting them at times like 6, 0, 0, with a plus 18 above the channel's logo, currently only affecting The Great Snail Race and Midlife Crustacean. In SpongeBob in Random Land, the U.S., censorship for the infamous Red Mist reference is used, but with the Red Mist audio. This shows how some content decisions were made at the source level rather than by local Spanish broadcasters. Linguistic evolution and consistency. One of the most interesting aspects of the Spanish Bob Esponja versions is how translation choices evolved over the show's long run. There are 3 versions of the intro's lyrics. The first was used from seasons 1 to 2, the second from season 3 onwards, and the third was used in the first movie. The Spanish Hide and Seek DVD includes partially redubbed versions where every character except SpongeBob is referred to by their English name instead of their Spanish name. This suggests there may have been market testing to see if maintaining English names would be more appealing, though the Spanish names ultimately prevailed. Translation consistency sometimes broke down. In Plankton Retires, the Krusty Krab, usually Crustaceo crujiente, was called Cangrejo crujiente when Perch Perkins asks Plankton. These inconsistencies show how challenging it can be to maintain perfect translation continuity across hundreds of episodes and multiple voice actors. The voice actor migration crisis. The Latin American version faced a unique challenge that reflects broader Latin American economic and political realities, the ongoing migration of Venezuelan voice actors. Luis Perez Pons, who voiced Mr. Krabs, quit after season 5 due to a failed agreement with Etc. Group and was replaced by Carlos Vitali. However, he later reprised his role in the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, and seasons 9 to 13 due to a new deal, continuing until his death on the 24th of October, 2023. By 2015, actress Melanie Henriquez retired from dubbing after the second film, moving to Spain, so her roles as Karen and Pearl were filled by other actresses. Isabel Vara was replaced by Elena Diaz Toledo for Mrs. Puff due to her move to Miami, Florida. This constant turnover required the production team to maintain character consistency while working with new voice actors, often recording in different countries. The fact that Bob Esponja maintained its quality through these challenges speaks to both the strength of the original material and the dedication of the Spanish production teams. Modern streaming and distribution. The digital age has created new opportunities and challenges for Spanish Bob Esponja versions. The Latin American version currently airs on Nickelodeon in Latin America and the United States, and on Nicktoons. It's also available on Paramount Plus, Max, and Netflix. This dub airs on the Bob Esponja channel on Pluto TV, with Season 1 airing very often. The proliferation of streaming platforms has made Bob Esponja more accessible than ever to Spanish-speaking audiences worldwide. On Amazon Prime Video, there are redubbed versions of The Algae's Always Greener and SpongeGuard on Duty. This suggests that streaming platforms sometimes commission their own Spanish versions, potentially creating multiple Spanish versions of the same episodes. Cultural legacy and continuing evolution. Today, Bob Esponja stands as more than just a translated version of an American cartoon. It's become a genuine part of Spanish-speaking culture. The character names, locations, and cultural references have become so established that Spanish speakers often don't think of them as translations. The success of Bob Esponja demonstrates how effective localization goes far beyond changing language. It requires understanding cultural humor, creating names that feel natural in the target language, adapting cultural references, and most importantly, finding voice actors who can bring these characters to life in a way that feels authentic to local audiences. SpongeBob SquarePants has been translated and dubbed into over 70 different languages, but the Spanish versions, both European and Latin American, represent some of the most successful and culturally integrated adaptations of the series. The ongoing production challenges, from voice actor migrations to technical limitations, show how complex international television production has become. Yet, through all these challenges, Bob Esponja has maintained its quality and cultural relevance for over 25 years. The translation philosophy, beyond words. The success of Bob Esponja reveals an important truth about translation. The best adaptations don't just change words, they change cultures. When SpongeBob became Bob Esponja, he didn't just get a Spanish name. He became a character who could exist naturally in a Spanish-speaking world. The translators understood that humor doesn't translate directly. Cultural references need to be adapted. Character names need to feel natural in the target language. And most importantly, the translated version needs to feel like it belongs to the audience watching it, not like a foreign import with Spanish voices. This philosophy explains why Bob Esponja has remained popular for decades, while many other translated shows come and go. Spanish-speaking audiences don't see Bob Esponja as an American cartoon with Spanish dubbing. They see it as their cartoon with their characters in their world. The distinction between SpongeBob and Bob Esponja isn't just linguistic, it's cultural. And that cultural translation has made all the difference in creating a truly global phenomenon that feels local wherever it's watched. Summary: from SpongeBob SquarePants to Bob Esponja Pantalones Cuadrados, from Bikini Bottom to Fondo de Bikini, from Krabby Patty to Changraburger, the Spanish. The translation of SpongeBob represents one of the most successful cartoon localizations in television history. The story of Bob Esponja is ultimately a story about the power of cultural adaptation. It shows how a cartoon created in Southern California could become authentically Spanish through careful translation, excellent voice acting, and respect for the target audience's culture and language. 25 years later, both SpongeBob and Bob Esponja continue to entertain audiences in their respective languages. The character may have two names, but he represents one universal truth. Great stories can cross any linguistic boundary when they're told with care, creativity, and cultural understanding. Whether you know him as SpongeBob or Bob Esponja, whether you live in Bikini Bottom or Fondo de Bikini, whether you prefer Krabby Patties or Changraburgers, the yellow sponge with the big dreams and bigger heart remains the same beloved character, just speaking a different language, living in a different cultural context, but bringing the same joy to audiences around the world. In the end, that's the real magic of Bob Esponja, proving that some stories are truly universal, no matter what language they're told in. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Indonesia's violence-based censorship campaign. Indonesia's violence-based censorship campaign. Patrick throwing a bowling ball at someone's head, SpongeBob hitting another character with a piece of wood, and cartoon rabbits hammering each other in the face. These scenes from beloved children's shows prompted Indonesia's Broadcasting Commission to declare war on animated violence. Sandy the Squirrel's bikini getting blurred out on national television, an official government warning letter sent to a TV station because SpongeBob threw a tart at someone's face. And these are just 3 examples of Indonesia's extensive censorship campaign targeting what they consider imitable violence in children's cartoons. Can you imagine the bureaucratic meetings, official documents, and regulatory decisions that have transformed Indonesia into one of the world's most aggressive cartoon censors over the past decade? I was certainly amazed by the scope and intensity of Indonesia's approach when I researched this topic. So, if you're ready to dive deep into how a country's broadcasting watchdog turned SpongeBob SquarePants into a public safety threat, sit back, relax, maybe avoid throwing any tarts, and let's begin. Let's start with the infamous 2019 incident that put SpongeBob in the regulatory crosshairs. The Great SpongeBob Movie Controversy of 2019. The 5th of September 2019 marked a turning point in Indonesia's relationship with animated entertainment when the Indonesian Broadcasting Commission, KPI, sent an official warning letter to television station GTV for broadcasting the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. This wasn't just another routine regulatory action. It was the moment when Indonesia's broadcasting watchdog officially declared cartoon violence a threat to public safety. The warning letter, posted on KPI's official website, accused GTV of violating the Broadcasting Code of Conduct, P3, and Program Standards, SPS, by airing the movie during family viewing hours. But what exactly made the SpongeBob SquarePants movie so dangerous in the eyes of Indonesian regulators? According to KPI Deputy Chairman Mulyo Hadi Purnomo's official statement, the movie contained scenes of violence that were inappropriate for children, particularly dangerous because they could be easily imitated by young viewers. The specific violent acts that triggered the warning included throwing a tart at someone's face and hitting another person with wood. The movie had originally aired on the 6th of August 2019 at 11:14 a.m. during GTV's Big Movie Family program and was later rebroadcast on the 22nd of August 2019 at 3:02 p.m. ME, both times deemed inappropriate by KPI for containing content that might encourage children to learn inappropriate behavior. But the SpongeBob SquarePants movie wasn't the only target. The same warning letter also cited problems with Rabbids Invasion, a French animated series that aired during SpongeBob time slots. KPI specifically objected to scenes of a rabbit committing acts of violence against other rabbits, namely hitting the face with a board, dropping a bowling ball from above so that it hits the head, hammering a hammer into the face, and hitting a cactus pot using a racket toward the face. This level of detailed analysis of cartoon violence reveals how seriously Indonesian regulators were taking the perceived threat of animated content. The legal framework, how Indonesia justifies cartoon censorship. Indonesia's aggressive approach to cartoon censorship isn't random bureaucratic overreach, RO7. It's based on a comprehensive legal framework designed to protect children from what regulators see as harmful content. The Indonesian Broadcasting Commission operates under Law No. 32 of 2002 on broadcasting, which established KPI as an independent broadcasting agency to regulate television and radio content across the country. This law gives KPI broad authority to monitor, evaluate, and sanction broadcasters who violate content standards. The SpongeBob movie violation specifically cited Article 14 of KPI's Code of Conduct, which states that a broadcasting unit must adhere to the interests of children in every aspect of broadcasting production. This article essentially requires all content aired during family viewing times to be evaluated through the lens of child safety and development. Additionally, the warning referenced Article 37 of the Commission's Program Standards, which states that a broadcasting program with the classification of R is forbidden to show content that might encourage children and teenagers to learn about inappropriate behavior or justify such behavior as being acceptable in everyday life. This legal framework creates a regulatory environment where any content that could potentially be imitated by children becomes subject to censorship. The emphasis on imitable behavior is particularly significant. It's not enough for content to be nonviolent. It must also avoid showing any actions that children might copy in real life. KPI's authority extends beyond simple content warnings. The Commission can issue written warnings, as they did with the SpongeBob movie, impose fines, suspend broadcasting licenses, and even ban content entirely. Television stations face real financial and operational consequences for violating these standards. The imitation theory. Indonesia's core censorship philosophy. At the heart of Indonesia's cartoon censorship campaign lies a fundamental belief that children will imitate whatever they see on screen, regardless of context, consequences, or the animated nature of the content. This imitation theory drives countless specific censorship decisions documented in Indonesian SpongeBob broadcasts. The scene where SpongeBob jumps from a diving board is cut because the scene might be imitated by viewers. Patrick blowing hot soup onto Squidward's bandaged face gets removed because children might copy this behavior. Even Squidward's toenail being ripped off in House Fancy is censored for being too sadistic and potentially imitable. The concern extends beyond obvious violence to surprisingly mundane activities. In Fools in April, the scene where Squidward plays an April Fool's prank on SpongeBob is completely cut because the scene may be imitated by viewers. This suggests Indonesian censors worry that even harmless pranks shown on television could encourage problematic behavior in real life. Perhaps most tellingly, in Snooze You Lose, the scene where SpongeBob and Patrick give sleeping Squidward coffee is cut in several countries, including Indonesia, specifically because kids might try imitating the scene. The idea that children would attempt to force-feed coffee to sleeping people based on a cartoon apparently warranted censorship. This imitation-focused approach treats children as essentially passive recipients who will mechanically reproduce whatever they observe on screen without considering context, consequences, or the fundamental difference between animated characters and real people. Sandy's bikini and the broader modesty campaign. Indonesia's SpongeBob censorship extends far beyond violence concerns into areas of modesty and religious sensitivity. Sandy Cheeks, the underwater squirrel character, became a particular target for Indonesian censors concerned about her bikini-clad appearance. Sandy's bikini has been systematically blurred or covered with digital clothing in Indonesian broadcasts. This censorship reflects Indonesia's predominantly Muslim cultural values and KPI's interpretation of appropriate content for family viewing. The fact that Sandy is an anthropomorphic squirrel living underwater apparently didn't exempt her from modesty requirements. This modesty-based censorship reveals how Indonesian regulators view cartoon characters as subject to the same cultural and religious standards as real people. Sandy's scientific diving suit and air helmet are acceptable, but her bikini underneath is deemed potentially harmful to young viewers. The Sandy censorship also demonstrates how Indonesian broadcasting standards can be more restrictive than the original American content standards. While Sandy's bikini was never considered problematic by American broadcasters or parents groups, Indonesian regulators saw it as requiring censorship to protect children from inappropriate sexual content. The Indonesian Broadcasting Commission, Structure and Power. Understanding Indonesia's cartoon censorship requires understanding the Indonesian Broadcasting Commission, KPI itself, an independent regulatory body with sweeping power over the country's media landscape. Established in 2002, KPI consists of the Central Indonesian Broadcasting Commission, KPI Pusat, and Regional Indonesian Broadcasting Commissions, KPID, operating at the provincial level. This structure means that censorship decisions can vary between different regions of Indonesia, creating a complex patchwork of content standards. The Commission's independence is both its strength and its weakness. While independence theoretically protects KPI from political interference, it also means the Commission faces limited oversight or appeal processes when making controversial decisions. Television stations can receive warnings, fines, or license suspensions with relatively limited recourse. KPI's power extends beyond simple content review. The Commission actively monitors broadcasts, responds to public complaints, issues public statements about problematic content, and maintains detailed databases of violations and sanctions. The thoroughness of their documentation means that specific censorship decisions are well recorded and publicly available. The Commission also engages in public education campaigns, explaining their decisions and encouraging public participation in content monitoring. This creates a cultural environment where cartoon censorship is presented as community involvement in child protection rather than government overreach. Historical context: Indonesia's censorship evolution. Indonesia's aggressive approach to cartoon censorship didn't emerge in a vacuum. It reflects the country's complex history with media regulation and content control. As early as September 2014, KPI reprimanded 5 major cartoons: Tom and Jerry, SpongeBob SquarePants, Crayon Shin-chan, Little Krishna, and Bima Sakti, Indonesian name for Chota Beam, after being considered to contain violence, pornography, and material unsuitable for children. This suggests that concern about animated content has been building for nearly a decade. The regulatory framework itself reflects Indonesia's post-Suharto democratization process. The 2002 broadcasting law that established KPI was part of broader media reforms designed to create independent oversight of previously state-controlled broadcasting. However, this independence also meant that KPI developed its own interpretation of appropriate content standards, sometimes more restrictive than government oversight might have produced. Indonesia's majority Muslim population and cultural values significantly influence content standards. What might be acceptable in secular or predominantly Christian countries gets scrutinized through the lens of Islamic values and Indonesian cultural norms. This cultural context helps explain why modesty concerns about Sandy's bikini or concerns about imitable behavior reflect broader Indonesian social values. Specific censorship examples: a comprehensive catalog. The scope of Indonesia's SpongeBob censorship becomes clear when examining the extensive catalog of specific scenes and episodes that have been modified, cut, or banned entirely. Violence-related cuts. Jellyfishing. Patrick stabbing a jellyfish net through Squidward's palm gets removed. The Battle of Bikini Bottom. Multiple scenes of SpongeBob and Patrick fighting are cut for being gruesome. SpongeBob meets the Strangler. Both SpongeBob stepping on the Strangler's eyes with spiky shoes and the Strangler punching SpongeBob are removed. The Two Faces of Squidward. SpongeBob slamming Squidward with a door is cut as harmful to imitate. Life insurance. Scenes of pillow fights, being hit with a rake, and characters being struck by lightning are all removed. Imitation. Concerns. Help wanted. SpongeBob jumping from a diving board is cut because viewers might imitate it. Krabbyland. All scenes where SpongeBob gets injured are removed to prevent audience imitation. Whirly brains. Scenes showing characters opening their heads to reveal brains are cut because children might try to imitate it. Krusty Katering. A scene where a child sneezes on food is removed due to fears viewers might imitate this behavior. Cultural and religious concerns. Someone's in the kitchen with Sandy. Scenes where Sandy appears without her fur are censored and blurred for nudity. Plankton's Army. References to root beer are cut because root beer is considered unhealthy or referencing alcohol. Episodes featuring Christmas themes are often not re-aired because most residents in Indonesia do not celebrate Christmas. Gross out content. The Splinter. Scenes showing SpongeBob's skeleton are cut for being too gruesome. House Fancy. The infamous toenail scene is removed for being too sadistic. Squidtastic Voyage. Squidward swallowing his clarinet is cut for being gruesome. This extensive catalog shows that Indonesian censors examine SpongeBob content with extraordinary detail, finding problematic elements in even the most innocent cartoon scenarios. Public response. The Number Save SpongeBob campaign. Indonesia's cartoon censorship hasn't gone unopposed. The 2019 SpongeBob movie controversy sparked significant public backlash, with Indonesian netizens launching the Number Save SpongeBob hashtag campaign on social media. The public response revealed a significant disconnect between KPI's censorship priorities and popular opinion. Twitter users mocked the idea that SpongeBob throwing a tart constituted dangerous violence, with many pointing out the irony that Indonesian television regularly shows far more violent content in news broadcasts and local programming. Some critics noted that Indonesian charity shows like Beda Rumah, House Operation, and Uang Kaget, Cash Surprise, which arguably exploit poverty for entertainment, have avoided KPI sanctions, while cartoon characters face intense scrutiny. The Number Save SpongeBob campaign also highlighted generational differences in media consumption. Many younger Indonesians grew up watching SpongeBob without apparent harm, making KPI's concern about cartoon violence seem disconnected from lived experience. However, the public backlash had limited practical impact. KPI maintained its stance, and censorship of animated content continued. The Commission's independence from political pressure meant that public opinion alone couldn't force policy changes. Comparative censorship, Indonesia versus the world. Indonesia's approach to cartoon censorship is notably more aggressive than most other countries, even those with similar cultural or religious values. While many countries edit SpongeBob content for various reasons, the UK removes flashing lights that could trigger epilepsy. Various countries remove sexual innuendo. Indonesia's systematic approach to removing imitable violence is relatively unique. Even countries with strict broadcast standards rarely achieve Indonesia's level of detailed censorship. The extensive documentation of specific scene cuts, the official warning letters for cartoon content, and the systematic application of imitation theory represent an unusually comprehensive approach to animated content regulation. This comparative context suggests that Indonesia's cartoon censorship reflects specific institutional choices rather than universal standards for children's media. Other predominantly Muslim countries, other developing nations, and even other countries with conservative social values haven't developed similarly extensive cartoon censorship systems. The economic impact, broadcasters under pressure. Indonesian cartoon censorship creates significant economic pressures for television broadcasters who must navigate between audience demand for popular content and regulatory requirements that can make that content unsuitable for broadcast. Television stations like GTV face real financial consequences for KPI violations. Warning letters can escalate to fines, license suspensions, or even license revocation. This creates powerful incentives for broadcasters to self-censor content rather than risk regulatory sanctions. The need to edit content also creates additional production costs. Broadcasters must employ staff to review content, make cuts, and ensure compliance with KPI standards. These costs are particularly burdensome for smaller stations with limited resources. Some episodes become so heavily edited that they're essentially unwatchable, leading broadcasters to simply stop airing certain content rather than deal with extensive editing requirements. The result is reduced programming options for Indonesian viewers, particularly children who lose access to popular international content. Children's media landscape beyond SpongeBob. SpongeBob isn't the only animated target of Indonesian censorship. The systematic approach extends across children's programming, creating a significantly altered media landscape for young Indonesian viewers. Tom and Jerry faces regular editing for cartoon violence. Crayon Shin-chan gets censored for crude humor and inappropriate behavior. Even educational programs like Little Krishna and Bima Sakti, Chota Beam, have faced scrutiny for content deemed unsuitable for children. This broad approach means that Indonesian children consume a significantly different version of global children's media than their peers in other countries. Popular shows are either heavily edited, irregularly broadcast, or completely unavailable through official channels. The censorship also creates incentives for viewers to seek uncensored content through unofficial channels. potentially reducing the effectiveness of the regulatory system while also reducing revenue for official broadcasters. Cultural values versus global media. Indonesia's cartoon censorship represents a broader tension between preserving local cultural values and participating in global media culture. From KPI's perspective, animated content represents a potential threat to Indonesian cultural and religious values. American cartoons may normalize behaviors, attitudes, or cultural practices that conflict with Indonesian social norms. Censorship becomes a way to participate in global media culture while maintaining cultural boundaries. This tension is particularly evident in the treatment of gender and modesty issues. Sandy's bikini becomes problematic not because it's inherently sexual, but because it conflicts with Indonesian standards for appropriate dress and representation of female characters. The emphasis on imitable behavior also reflects Indonesian concepts of childhood development and media influence that may differ from Western approaches. If Indonesian culture views children as more susceptible to media influence, then more aggressive content regulation becomes a logical protective measure. Technological challenges, digital media, and enforcement. Indonesia's cartoon censorship system was designed for traditional television broadcasting, but digital media presents new challenges that existing regulatory frameworks struggle to address. KPI has announced plans to monitor Netflix and YouTube content, even though the Commission acknowledges it lacks legal authority to regulate internet-based media. This creates a regulatory gap where the same content that gets heavily censored on television may be freely available through streaming platforms. The technological challenge is compounded by the global nature of digital media. While KPI can regulate Indonesian television stations, international streaming services operate under different legal frameworks and may not be subject to the same content standards. Indonesian children increasingly consume media through digital platforms that fall outside traditional regulatory oversight. This potentially undermines the effectiveness of television-based censorship while creating new concerns about unregulated content access. The psychology of censorship, protecting versus sheltering. Indonesia's approach raises fundamental questions about the psychology of childhood media consumption and the effectiveness of protective censorship. The imitation theory underlying Indonesian censorship assumes that children lack the cognitive development to distinguish between animated entertainment and real-world behavior. This perspective treats children as vulnerable to harmful media influence and requires adult intervention to protect them. However, research on childhood media consumption suggests that children are generally capable of distinguishing between fantasy and reality, particularly in obviously animated content. The concern that children will imitate SpongeBob's behavior may overestimate media influence while underestimating children's cognitive abilities. The extensive censorship also potentially deprives children of opportunities to develop critical thinking about media content. Rather than learning to evaluate and contextualize what they see, children receive pre-filtered content that removes potentially problematic elements. Regional variations. Not all Indonesia is the same. Indonesia's federal structure means that cartoon censorship can vary between different regions, creating a complex landscape of content standards across the archipelago. While the national KPI sets overall standards, regional Indonesian broadcasting commissions, KPID, operate at the provincial level and may interpret guidelines differently. Some regions may be more or less strict in their application of censorship standards. This regional variation means that the same SpongeBob episode might air in different versions across Indonesia, depending on local regulatory interpretation. Urban areas with more diverse populations might have different standards than rural areas with more conservative social values. The regional structure also creates enforcement challenges. National networks may face different standards in different provinces, requiring multiple versions of the same content or forcing uniform censorship based on the most restrictive regional requirements. International relations, soft diplomacy through cartoons. Indonesia's cartoon censorship has international implications, particularly for cultural relations with content-producing countries like the United States. American media companies invest significant resources in creating content for international markets, including Indonesia's large population. Extensive censorship requirements can make Indonesian distribution less attractive or profitable, potentially reducing the country's access to international entertainment content. The censorship also affects Indonesia's cultural diplomacy and international image. Reports about SpongeBob censorship generate international attention that may not align with Indonesia's efforts to project a modern, globally integrated image. However, Indonesia's approach also demonstrates cultural sovereignty in the face of global media dominance. By asserting the right to modify content to align with local values, Indonesia maintains cultural autonomy even while participating in global entertainment markets. The future of Indonesian censorship. Several trends suggest that Indonesia's approach to cartoon censorship may face increasing challenges and potential changes in coming years. Technological change is perhaps the biggest challenge. As viewing shifts from traditional television to streaming platforms, the effectiveness of television-focused censorship diminishes. KPI's stated intention to monitor internet content faces significant legal and practical obstacles. Generational change may also affect censorship support. Indonesians who grew up watching uncensored or lightly censored international content may have different views about the necessity of extensive cartoon censorship for their own children. Economic pressures on the broadcasting industry may also create incentives for regulatory reform. If extensive censorship requirements make Indonesian television less competitive with uncensored streaming options, industry pressure for more flexible standards may increase. However, Indonesia's cultural and religious values remain strong, and public support for protecting children from inappropriate content continues. The specific form of censorship may evolve, but the underlying concern about media influence on children likely persists. Beyond cartoons, the broader censorship context. Indonesian cartoon censorship exists within a broader context of media regulation that extends far beyond children's programming. KPI regularly sanctions adult programming for various content violations. In recent years, the Commission has banned LGBTQ characters from television, restricted the broadcast times of songs deemed immoral, and warned broadcasters about various forms of content that might violate community standards. This broader regulatory context suggests that cartoon censorship isn't an isolated phenomenon, but part of a comprehensive approach to media regulation that prioritizes community values and cultural protection over media freedom or international content standards. The extensive nature of Indonesian media regulation also means that cartoon censorship doesn't face significant institutional opposition. Broadcasters are accustomed to working within restrictive content guidelines, and regulatory agencies have established procedures for content review and modification. Indonesia's violence-based censorship campaign represents one of the world's most comprehensive attempts to protect children from animated content deemed potentially harmful. From SpongeBob throwing tarts to Patrick's cartoon violence, Indonesian regulators have created an extensive system designed to filter out any content that children might theoretically imitate. The Indonesian approach reflects genuine concern about childhood development and media influence. KPI's detailed analysis of potentially problematic content, extensive documentation of censorship decisions, and systematic application of protective standards demonstrates serious commitment to child welfare as the Commission understands it. However, the effectiveness and appropriateness of this approach remain debatable. The assumption that children will mechanically imitate cartoon behavior, the treatment of animated characters as subject to real-world behavioral standards, and the systematic removal of any potentially imitable content may overestimate media influence while underestimating children's cognitive abilities. The economic and cultural costs are also significant. Indonesian children lose access to popular international content, broadcasters face additional regulatory burdens, and the country's international image suffers when reports of SpongeBob censorship generate global attention. Perhaps most importantly, Indonesia's approach raises fundamental questions about the balance between protecting children and preparing them to navigate an increasingly complex media landscape. While censorship may shield children from potentially problematic content, it may also deprive them of opportunities to develop critical thinking skills about media consumption. The number Save SpongeBob campaign and public criticism of cartoon censorship suggests that many Indonesians question whether the current approach effectively serves children's interests. The disconnect between regulatory concern and popular opinion indicates that Indonesia's cartoon censorship may be more about institutional priorities than genuine public demand for content protection. As Indonesia continues to integrate with global media culture while maintaining cultural sovereignty, the country will likely need to find new approaches that balance child protection with practical media consumption realities. The current system of extensive cartoon censorship may prove unsustainable in an era of digital media and global content distribution. Whether Indonesia's violence-based censorship campaign ultimately helps or hinders children's development remains an open question. What's certain is that Indonesian regulators have created one of the world's most detailed systems for analyzing and modifying animated content, turning SpongeBob SquarePants into an unlikely test case for the limits of protective censorship in the digital age. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the European Portuguese triple dub phenomenon. The European Portuguese triple dub phenomenon. SpongeBob SquarePants has a very special place in Portuguese television history. What makes it truly unique is that this famous cartoon had not one, not two, but three completely different Portuguese dubs over the years. This unusual situation created what fans and experts call the European Portuguese triple dub phenomenon, a rare case where the same show was dubbed 3 separate times for the same country. The first dub, 6 Pioneer Attempt, 2001 to 2004. The story begins in April 2001 when SpongeBob SquarePants first arrived in Portugal. The Portuguese television channel SIC was the first to bring this underwater adventure to Portuguese audiences. This original dub ran from the 4th of April 2001 until 2004, covering the first 2 seasons of the show. The SIC dub was produced by Grafacine, a Portuguese dubbing studio. The main voice of SpongeBob was provided by Romulo Fragoso, a Portuguese voice actor who would later become important in the franchise's Portuguese history. Mario Bomba, who would also play a bigger role later, served as an emergency backup voice for SpongeBob when Romulo Fragoso was unavailable. This first dub had its own version of the famous SpongeBob theme song. The opening was sung by Romulo Fragoso himself, with backup vocals provided by Alexandra Diogo. The theme song kept the same melody as the original English version but had Portuguese lyrics that followed the same pattern as the American version. However, this first attempt at bringing SpongeBob to Portugal was not very successful. The dub quality was considered poor by many viewers. There were problems with translation accuracy, and the overall dubbing quality was seen as below standard. Many Portuguese children and families were not impressed with this version of their favorite underwater sponge. The SIC dub only covered the first 40 episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants, which included the complete first and second seasons. After 2004, SIC stopped airing the show, and this original dub became harder and harder to find. Today, very little of the SIC dub survives, making it somewhat of a lost media curiosity for fans of Portuguese television history. The launch of Nickelodeon Portugal and the need for change. Everything changed in 2005 when Nickelodeon launched its Portuguese channel. Nickelodeon Portugal wanted to bring SpongeBob SquarePants to their new channel, but they faced a problem. The existing SIC dub was widely considered to be of poor quality, with bad translations and terrible dubbing work that did not meet Nickelodeon standards. Nickelodeon Portugal made a decision that would be crucial in SpongeBob's Portuguese history. They would create a completely new dub from scratch. This was unusual because most international versions of shows simply use existing dubs when they move between channels. But Nickelodeon felt the quality was so poor that starting over was the only option. The timing was perfect for another reason. When Nickelodeon Portugal launched, SpongeBob SquarePants had already produced episodes beyond Season 2. The SIC dub had only covered Seasons 1 and 2, so Portuguese audiences had never seen the later episodes. Nickelodeon Portugal could offer both better quality dubbing of the early episodes and access to newer content that Portuguese audiences had never experienced before. The second dub, Nickelodeon's first attempt, 2005 to 2010. On the 1st of June 2005, Nickelodeon Portugal launched with a brand new SpongeBob SquarePants dub. This second dub was produced by Pim Pam Pum, a Portuguese dubbing and production company that would become central to SpongeBob's Portuguese story. The name Pim Pam Pum is interesting because it comes from Portuguese cultural history. Originally, Pim Pam Pum was the name of a comic supplement that was published in the Portuguese newspaper O Século from 1925 to 1978. This weekly comic section was aimed at young readers and contained comic strips, puzzles, games, and stories. The dubbing company chose this nostalgic name to connect with Portuguese childhood memories. This second dub started with Season 3 of SpongeBob SquarePants and worked backward to redub Seasons 1 and 2 with higher quality. The voice cast was completely different from the SIC version. The dubbing quality was much better, with more accurate translations and more professional voice acting. Nickelodeon Portugal's version was successful with audiences. Portuguese children finally had a version of SpongeBob that matched the quality they expected. The show became popular, and Nickelodeon continued dubbing new seasons as they became available. This second dub covered Seasons 1 through 5 of SpongeBob SquarePants, giving Portuguese audiences access to much more content than the SIC version ever provided. The complete third season from this dub period still occasionally airs on Portuguese television today, making it one of the most preserved parts of the second dub. However, this second dub era would not last forever. In 2009, major changes were coming to Nickelodeon's European operations that would affect Portuguese SpongeBob fans once again. The Iberia merger and technical complications. In September 2009, something significant happened to European Nickelodeon channels. Nickelodeon Portugal merged its broadcasting operations with Nickelodeon Spain to create Nickelodeon Iberia. This merger was designed to save money and create efficiencies across Spanish and Portuguese markets. The merger created immediate technical problems for SpongeBob SquarePants. Since both countries now shared the same broadcast feed, the Spanish version of the show would sometimes appear with Spanish title cards reading Bob Esponja instead of maintaining the Portuguese presentation. Portuguese viewers would suddenly see Spanish graphics during their Portuguese language episodes. Some episodes even had Spanish subtitles accidentally included during the Portuguese broadcast. These technical problems frustrated Portuguese viewers who wanted a proper Portuguese presentation of their favorite show. But the biggest change was still coming. Nickelodeon decided that the 2005 to 2010 dub quality could be improved even further. In 2009, they made the decision to create yet another completely new Portuguese dub of SpongeBob SquarePants. The third dub, the current version, 2010 present. In 2010, Nickelodeon created their third and final Portuguese dub of SpongeBob SquarePants. This new version was still produced by Pim Pam Pum, but with a updated voice cast and improved production values. This third dub started airing in September 2010 when SpongeBob moved to TVI, another Portuguese television channel. TVI began broadcasting with Season 6, then showed Season 7, and eventually went back to air Season 5. This unusual broadcasting order meant that Portuguese audiences experienced SpongeBob episodes in a mixed-up sequence. The third dub featured some interesting voice acting connections. Mario Bomba, who had been an emergency backup in the original SIC dub, was now given the permanent role of Patrick Star. This created a connection between the first and third dubs that many fans found interesting. Romulo Fragoso, the original SpongeBob voice from the SIC dub, returned to the franchise in this third version, but not as SpongeBob. Instead, he became the voice of Plankton, the show's main villain. This role change showed how the Portuguese voice acting community adapted and found new ways to contribute to the show's success. Some of the original voice actors from earlier dubs also returned. João Araújo took over as the voice of Mr. Krabs and remained consistent in this role across different dubbing versions. Alexandra Diogo continued as Sandy Cheeks until Season 10, when Monica Chaby replaced her after Diogo left the Pim Pam Pum Company. Sadly, some voice actors passed away during the long run of the third dub. Pedro Sousa, who voiced Plankton, died in 2017. After his death, Ricardo Montero took over the Plankton role, starting with Season 10. These changes showed how long-running international dubs must adapt to real-world circumstances while trying to maintain consistency for audiences. Broadcasting journey across multiple channels. The third Portuguese dub had an interesting journey across different television channels. It started on TVI in September 2010, where it aired until 2014. During its time on TVI, SpongeBob became part of a programming block called Kid Canal, which ran from 2012 to 2014 before being discontinued. After TVI, the show continued on Nickelodeon Portugal itself, but the broadcasting story became more complex due to the ongoing European channel mergers. By December 2020, Nickelodeon Iberia was airing seasons 6 through 13 of SpongeBob, with Season 5 being added in fall 2020. The show also appeared on other platforms. MTV Portugal aired SpongeBob SquarePants in English with Portuguese subtitles between September 2010 and April 2011, but only showed Season 1 and the first half of Season 2. This was interesting because it offered Portuguese audiences a way to hear the original English voices while reading Portuguese translations. Technical and creative challenges. Creating 3 different dubs of the same show created unique challenges. Each dub had to deal with the famous SpongeBob SquarePants theme song differently. The Portuguese versions kept the original English title SpongeBob SquarePants instead of translating it to Bob Esponja like the Spanish version. This decision made Portugal one of the few countries to keep the English title in their local dub. The theme song itself went through multiple versions. There were different recordings for different dub periods, with different singers and slightly different Portuguese lyrics. The third dub's theme song was performed by João Araújo, whose version became the most familiar to contemporary Portuguese audiences. The intro animations also changed over time. Different seasons used different visual approaches, sometimes using international versions of the opening sequence, and sometimes using versions adapted for the Spanish-Portuguese shared broadcast feed. Each dub had to create Portuguese names for characters and locations that worked well with Portuguese language and culture. Unlike the Brazilian Portuguese version, which uses Bob Esponja Calça Quadrada, the European Portuguese version kept character names closer to the English originals while adapting them to Portuguese pronunciation. The redubbing process. One of the most unusual aspects of this triple dub phenomenon was that Nickelodeon went back and redubbed early episodes multiple times. In 2009, when the third dub was being created, Nickelodeon redubbed the SIC era episodes, seasons 1 and 2, with their new voice cast to create consistency across all seasons. This redubbing process was extensive and expensive. It meant that Portuguese SpongeBob fans have seen the same episodes with completely different voice actors multiple times. A Portuguese child who watched season 1 in 2002 heard completely different voices than a Portuguese child watching the same season 1 episodes in 2015. The redubbing also meant that very little of the original SIC dub survived in official releases. Most of the SIC dub became lost media that can only be found in old recordings made by fans or in rare DVD releases from the early 2000s. Preservation and lost media. Today, the preservation of these 3 dubs is uneven. The current 3rd dub is widely available and continues to air regularly. Some episodes from the 2nd dub, 2005 to 2010, can still be seen, particularly the complete 3rd season, which occasionally appears on Portuguese television. However, the original SIC dub from 2001 to 2004 has become very rare. Only fragments survive in fan recordings and old promotional materials. This makes the SIC dub valuable to collectors and researchers interested in Portuguese television history. The loss of the early dubs represents a broader challenge in preserving international television content. When companies create new dubs, the older versions are often abandoned and forgotten, leading to permanent losses of cultural content that many people remember from their childhood. Cultural impact and legacy. The triple dub phenomenon had significant cultural impact in Portugal. Different generations of Portuguese children grew up with different voices for the same characters. This created interesting family situations where parents and children had different definitive versions of SpongeBob in their memories. Portuguese SpongeBob became a shared cultural reference, but one with multiple layers. Older fans might remember Romulo Fragoso's SpongeBob from the SIC era, while younger fans know the current voices from the 3rd dub. This generational difference in character voices is unusual and creates unique conversations among Portuguese fans. The phenomenon also demonstrates how international television markets adapt and evolve. The willingness to completely redub a show multiple times shows how seriously Portuguese broadcasters took the quality of children's entertainment. Technical innovations and standards. Each successive dub represented improvements in Portuguese dubbing technology and standards. The SIC dub was created with 2001 era dubbing technology and practices. The second Nickelodeon dub incorporated better recording equipment and more professional voice direction. The 3rd dub benefited from even more advanced audio technology and years of experience in dubbing children's animation. These technological improvements meant that each version of Portuguese SpongeBob sounded clearer and more professional than the previous version. The voice acting became more natural, the audio mixing improved, and the overall production values reached international standards. Current status and future. Today, the 3rd Portuguese dub continues as the official version of SpongeBob SquarePants in Portugal. It airs on Nickelodeon and various streaming platforms. As of 2020 and beyond, the dub covers seasons 1 through 13 and continues to add new seasons as they are produced in the United States. The voice cast has stabilized, with most major characters having consistent voice actors who have been in their roles for over a decade. This stability helps Portuguese audiences develop strong connections with the characters' voices. However, the European Portuguese dub faces new challenges. Portuguese and Spanish Nickelodeon content no longer appears on the Spanish and Portuguese versions of Nickelodeon's YouTube channel, making it harder for fans to find and share Portuguese SpongeBob content online. The European Portuguese triple dub phenomenon represents one of the most unusual cases in international television dubbing. The decision to completely redub SpongeBob SquarePants 3 separate times for the same audience was expensive and time-consuming, but it shows the commitment to quality that Portuguese broadcasters felt was necessary for this beloved children's show. This phenomenon created multiple generations of Portuguese SpongeBob voices, preserved and lost different versions of the same content, and demonstrated how international television markets can evolve over time. From Romulo Fragoso's original SpongeBob voice in 2001 to the current voice cast that continues today, Portuguese SpongeBob has had one of the most complex and interesting dubbing histories of any international version of the show. The triple dub story is still being written, as the third dub continues to produce new episodes and reach new audiences. But the historical impact of this phenomenon, 3 different Portuguese versions of the same beloved character, makes it a unique chapter in both SpongeBob history and Portuguese television culture. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the Band Geeks episode censorship in Iran and Italy. The Band Geeks episode censorship in Iran and Italy. In the Persian and Italian dubs of the SpongeBob episode Band Geeks, the iconic Sweet Victory segment was completely cut or shortened, creating one of the most controversial censorship decisions in SpongeBob history. This wasn't just any ordinary scene being removed. This was the climactic moment that made Band Geeks the most beloved SpongeBob episode of all time, and its removal fundamentally changed the entire viewing experience for fans in these countries. Band Geeks originally aired on the 7th of September 2001 in the United States, quickly becoming a phenomenon that would define SpongeBob for generations. The episode follows Squidward as he attempts to form a marching band to impress his high school rival, Squilliam Fancison, at the Bubble Bowl. The entire episode builds toward the final performance, where SpongeBob and the ragtag group of Bikini Bottom residents deliver an amazing rock performance of Sweet Victory that leaves everyone stunned. This climactic moment represents the emotional payoff for the entire episode. Squidward finally gets his moment of triumph after years of failures and humiliations. The song Sweet Victory was written by David Glenn Isley and Bob Kulick, originally released in 1997 before being featured in the episode. It became so popular that it was later named the #1 greatest moment in Nicktoons history during the 100 Greatest Nicktoon Episodes marathon. International broadcasters faced unique challenges when adapting Band Geeks for their local audiences. The episode's structure relied heavily on its musical finale to deliver emotional satisfaction to viewers. As the episode gained popularity worldwide, different countries had to navigate their own broadcasting regulations, cultural sensitivities, and commercial constraints. For many countries, SpongeBob episodes aired without any problems. But Iran and Italy presented specific challenges that would lead to the controversial decision to remove or shorten the most important scene in SpongeBob history. The reasons for these cuts varied by country, but both decisions had the same devastating effect on the episode's impact. The censorship created a domino effect that ruined the episode's narrative structure. Band Geeks works as a story because it follows a classic underdog formula where everything seems hopeless until the final, triumphant moment. Squidward starts confident, gets increasingly frustrated with his terrible band members, eventually gives up in despair, but then gets redeemed when SpongeBob secretly trains everyone to perform amazingly. Without the Sweet Victory performance, the episode just ends with Squidward being disappointed. There's no payoff, no resolution, and no reason for the audience to care about anything that happened. The entire 22-minute episode becomes pointless without its final 3 minutes. Italian SpongeBob fans were particularly vocal about their frustration with this censorship. On fan forums, viewers complained that removing Sweet Victory was sacrilegious and made the episode pointless. They understood that the song was the entire reason the episode existed. Some fans described watching the Italian version as getting cheated out of the satisfying conclusion they expected. The censorship became so notorious that Italian fans would specifically seek out uncensored versions from other countries just to see what they were missing. Forum discussions revealed that many Italian viewers didn't even understand why Band Geeks was considered the greatest SpongeBob episode until they saw the uncensored version with Sweet Victory included. The reasons for the cuts varied by country, but both created the same devastating result. For Italy, the censorship was likely due to commercial constraints, since the dub was commissioned for Italia 1, a commercial broadcaster. Commercial broadcasters operate under different financial pressures than public networks or streaming services. They need to fit episodes into specific time slots and often can't afford to pay licensing fees for musical content that might not generate enough advertising revenue. Italia 1 probably calculated that paying for the rights to Sweet Victory wasn't worth the cost, especially since Italian audiences hadn't specifically requested the song. This created a situation where business considerations overruled artistic integrity and viewer satisfaction. For Iran, the situation was more complex because it involved religious and cultural sensitivities around music in children's programming. The Persian dub removed Sweet Victory, likely because music is haram according to certain interpretations of Islamic law. Different Islamic scholars have varying opinions about music in media, but conservative broadcasters often chose to err on the side of caution by removing musical content entirely rather than risk controversy. This meant that many Western animated shows had their musical numbers cut when aired in Iran, not just SpongeBob. However, the Persian dub, distributed by PSIM, actually shortened Sweet Victory, rather than removing it completely, suggesting that some versions tried to find a compromise between censorship requirements and storytelling needs. The impact of this censorship extended far beyond just disappointing fans in two countries. Band Geeks became globally famous specifically because of the Sweet Victory performance. The song became a cultural phenomenon, with millions of people requesting it be played at sporting events, and even petitioning for it to appear at Super Bowl halftime shows. Italian and Iranian viewers were completely cut off from participating in this cultural moment. They couldn't understand why people around the world were obsessed with a SpongeBob song they'd never heard. Social media posts about Sweet Victory made no sense to them. Memes and references flew over their heads completely. The censorship also highlighted the broader challenges of adapting American television content for international audiences. Different countries have different broadcasting standards, religious considerations, and commercial realities that can fundamentally change how content is presented. What works perfectly in one country might be impossible to broadcast in another. Band Geeks became a perfect case study of how these differences can completely alter a piece of entertainment. American viewers saw an uplifting story about perseverance and teamwork, with a triumphant musical finale that made them feel good about Squidward's success. Iranian and Italian viewers saw a depressing story about a failed musician whose dreams get crushed by incompetent people, with no redemption or happy ending. The technical aspects of implementing these censorship decisions created additional problems for broadcasters. In the Italian version on Italia 1, the episode jumped straight from Squidward's despair to the end credits, creating jarring pacing that made the episode feel unfinished and confusing. Viewers could tell something was missing, but they didn't know what. The transition felt abrupt and unsatisfying, leaving audiences wondering if there was a technical problem with the broadcast. This poor editing job made the censorship even more obvious and frustrating for Italian viewers. Indonesian versions also faced similar censorship issues, though for different reasons than Iran and Italy. The Indonesian cuts were primarily about time constraints rather than content restrictions. Broadcasters needed to fit more episodes into their programming blocks, so they cut musical segments to save time for other content. This showed that censorship wasn't always about moral or religious objections, OZG. Sometimes it was just about practical broadcasting considerations that had nothing to do with the actual content. The controversy around Band Geeks' censorship revealed how crucial music was to SpongeBob's global appeal and emotional impact. The show's creators had always used music as a way to create memorable moments and emotional connections with viewers. Sweet Victory represented the pinnacle of this approach, a genuine rock anthem that elevated a silly cartoon moment into something genuinely inspiring. When that music was removed, the emotional core of the episode disappeared entirely. The long-term consequences of this censorship continued to affect fans years later. When SpongeBob creator Steven Hillenburg died in November 2018, fans around the world created a petition requesting that Sweet Victory be played during Super Bowl late halftime show as a tribute to his legacy. This petition received over 1.1 million signatures from fans who had emotional connections to the song. But Italian and Iranian fans couldn't participate in this tribute because they had never experienced the song that meant so much to SpongeBob fans worldwide. The Super Bowl controversy made the censorship problem even more visible. During Super Bowl LII, a short clip of SpongeBob was used to introduce Travis Scott, but the full Sweet Victory song wasn't played. Fans around the world expressed disappointment and anger about this missed opportunity to honor Hillenburg's memory. Italian and Iranian fans found themselves in the strange position of being angry about something they had never actually seen, based on descriptions from fans in other countries. Today, the censorship of band geeks in Iran and Italy remains one of the most significant examples of how international broadcasting decisions can completely change viewers' experiences with beloved entertainment content. The episode continues to air in censored form in these countries, meaning that new generations of children are still missing out on what many consider the greatest moment in SpongeBob history. The censorship has become part of the show's international legacy, representing the complex challenges of bringing American entertainment to global audiences with different cultural, religious, and commercial constraints. The story of Band Geek's censorship also demonstrates how passionate fans can become when their favorite content is altered or removed. Italian fans' complaints on forums, Iranian viewers' confusion about global SpongeBob references, and the continuing search for uncensored versions all show how deeply audiences can connect with specific moments in television shows. When those moments are taken away, fans feel genuinely robbed of experiences that were important to them. As SpongeBob SquarePants continues to air around the world, the Band Geek censorship remains a reminder that not all viewers get to experience the same version of their favorite shows. Behind every international broadcast are countless decisions about what content is appropriate, affordable, and feasible for local audiences. Sometimes those decisions enhance the viewing experience by making content more culturally relevant. But sometimes, as with Sweet Victory in Iran and Italy, those decisions remove the very elements that made the content special in the first place. The censorship of Sweet Victory in Band Geeks stands as one of the most significant losses in SpongeBob's international broadcasting history, representing millions of fans who never got to experience one of the most beloved moments in cartoon television history. In Iran and Italy, the climactic Sweet Victory performance was completely cut or shortened from SpongeBob's most beloved episode, Band Geeks. In Italy, this was likely due to commercial constraints from broadcaster Italia One not wanting to pay music licensing fees. In Iran, it was likely because music was considered inappropriate for children's programming under certain Islamic interpretations. This censorship ruined the episode's entire narrative structure. Band Geeks builds to Squidward's triumphant moment conducting the band's amazing performance of Sweet Victory. Without this finale, the episode just ends with Squidward being disappointed, making the whole story pointless. Italian fans were particularly angry about this censorship, calling it sacrilegious on forums and seeking uncensored versions from other countries. The censorship also cut these viewers off from a major cultural phenomenon. Sweet Victory became globally famous and was even petitioned to be played at Super Bowl halftime shows. But Iranian and Italian fans couldn't participate because they'd never heard the song. This remains one of the most significant examples of how international broadcasting decisions can completely change viewers' experiences with beloved entertainment. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.